The chill moves through the hide wall like it has rights. And maybe it does. After all, the hut wasn't built to keep anything truly out, just to give the illusion of inside. You lie curled beneath a patchwork of animal skins, each one with its own texture, its own stink, its own whispered memory of once having lived better than this. You tug one edge closer around your neck. It's damp. Of course it's damp. Everything is damp. You've forgotten what dry smells like. It probably smells like dreams. Outside, the fire has gone out. Again. And with it, the faint warmth that kept the floor from biting quite so hard. You feel the bite now. It gnaws upward, from stone to skin, settling in your spine and never quite leaving. You shift. Something crunches beneath your hip. A bit of bone, or flint, or something that should have been cleared away last night. But you were too tired, too cold, too full of yesterday's root mush and goat fat to care. There's a stirring on the other side of the sleeping space, a heavy grunt, a low mutter, the sound of someone scratching vigorously at something they probably shouldn't. You pretend not to hear it. You pretend not to smell it. You pretend your stomach isn't beginning to do that slow, warning twist, the kind that says, something is coming, and it isn't a vision. Or maybe it is, depending on how you define terror. You should have gone before the hunt. That much is obvious now. The morning preparation begins in that particular prehistoric silence, full of breath and grumbles, and the distant howling of things that would very much like to eat you. The old man is already outside, checking the spears, huffing into his beard. You know this because he stomped on your foot on the way out and didn't apologize. He never does. Apologies are for people who can afford them. You curl tighter. Your gut protests, loudly. You try to answer it with a mental bribe. Not now, not yet, just hold it in until after the hunt. But it doesn't listen. It never does. It has a timeline of its own, and you suspect it enjoys your suffering. The kind of slow, squeezing urgency that's more psychological than physical. The creeping awareness that there's no toilet, no outhouse, not even a pit. Just trees and rocks, and the mocking wind that whistles through your inadequacy. Eventually, you must move. The cave shelter groans as bodies shift and grope their way into semi-wakefulness. Someone sneezes wetly. Someone else coughs up something thick and interesting. You do not investigate. You step outside. The cold hits you like a philosophy, deep, existential, and not entirely optional. Your breath fogs, then vanishes. The sky is that pale, aching blue that makes you feel like it's judging you. And perhaps it is. You walk stiff-legged past the fire ring, where embers smolder under a crust of ash, pretending to still be useful. They are not. Like the old spear with the cracked tip, or the cousin who tried to paint mammoths and ended up drawing lumpy cows instead. You scan the horizon, trees, rocks, low brush, all of it, potential. All of it, awful. There's no privacy in the wild, only temporary illusions of it. You choose a patch of brush that might conceal your shame if you crouch just right and hope no one looks directly at you, or laughs, or tries to trade for the spot after you're done, because it has warmth. It's happened before. The ground is wet, always, not from rain, but from the kind of eternal damp that seeps up from the very bones of the earth. The squat is undignified. The position is a masterclass in vulnerability. Every noise becomes a threat. Every breeze is a betrayal. And when the moment comes, it's not swift. It's a slow, reluctant release, the kind that demands silence and concentration, and still manages to be noisy and humiliating. You do your best. There's no paper. Of course there's no paper. There's moss, if you're lucky. Bark, if you're not. Leaves. Questionable. You learned that the hard way. Some of them bite back. You shuffle awkwardly back to camp, slightly cleaner, slightly colder, and immeasurably more aware of the simple luxuries you do not have. a proper seat, a door, a hole with edges that weren't carved by indifferent frost, and the occasional desperate rodent. You've returned from war, and no one claps. They're too busy pretending they didn't hear the sounds you just made, that you didn't just become part of the forest's long, smelly memory. Breakfast is a cold thing eaten quickly. Bits of fat scraped from last night's bone, thickened root porridge, and a handful of berries that might be food or might be revenge. You chew with commitment, but not joy. The warmth you were hoping for doesn't arrive. Not in the food, not in your limbs, not anywhere. And still your gut makes threats. Because this was not a one-time betrayal. This is a system, a cycle, a body at war with itself and its circumstances. You begin to wonder if it's better to simply never eat again, or never move, or both. The hunt begins with quiet footsteps and louder anxieties. You're carrying a spear that's slightly too short, with a point that's slightly too dull. You wear furs that once belonged to an animal more confident than you. The others move like they've done this before, because they have. You shuffle behind them, trying not to step in anything. Fresh. The irony is not lost on you. The woods are indifferent. They do not care that you are cold, or that you have regrets, or that your insides are rearranging themselves in protest. The deer don't care either. They exist only to flee, and to mock you with their perfectly functioning bowels and their tendency to relieve themselves mid-run, as if it's no big deal, as if the world itself bends to accommodate them. You wonder what it's like to live without shame, without the constant fear of being seen, without the knowledge that your every necessary function is both public and judged. You wonder what it's like to have fur in the right places, to be warm all the time, to never have to choose between comfort and decency. You envy animals, deeply, and then someone farts. It's sudden, loud, inappropriate. It cuts through the mist like a declaration of war. You all stop. Pretend nothing happened. Pretend the earth itself just made that noise. You carry on. But trust has been broken. Bonds have frayed. The hunt continues, but something fundamental has shifted. You are all now just people who know too much. By midday, the cold is less sharp, but your stomach is not. It speaks in gurgles and threats. There's another squat in your future. You can feel it. A desperate, awkward negotiation between dignity and urgency. You look for a place with cover. Again. You fail. Again. This time it's behind a boulder. Not as much privacy. Not as much hope. You try to pretend you are a rock too. Solid. Unmoving. Invisible. You fail at that as well. And when it's done, when you shuffle back into the group, a little emptier, a little more ashamed, you vow to never again eat before a hunt. You vow to hold it next time. You vow to be stronger. You vow many things, none of them true. Because this is life. This is the routine. This is how it's always been. Squatting behind rocks, wishing for paper, praying the wind is kind, hoping no one walks by and sees you mid-process, cheeks out, dignity dangling like a bit of moss caught on a root. You are not alone. Others go through it too. You've seen the walk, the shame waddle back to camp, the downcast eyes, the lingering scent of defeat. You've laughed at others. Now it is your turn. The cycle continues. The forest remembers. So does your cousin. He will bring this up later. At a feast. Loudly. The day ends as it began, cold, damp, and full of digestive discontent. You lie beneath your patchwork skins, staring at the smoky ceiling, wondering if tomorrow will be better. It won't. But that's not the point. The point is enduring. Squatting. Wiping with regret. Pretending not to hear what you definitely just heard. And as the darkness settles back in, heavy and damp and filled with imagined smells, you think, with weary certainty, tomorrow's chapter is going to be worse. You can already feel it rumbling The warmth of the animal hides is reluctant to release you, but your stomach is even more insistent. It grumbles with the kind of determination only achieved by foraged berries of questionable ripeness and last night's undercooked root mash. Outside, the smoke of dawn clings low to the ground, drifting in lazy spirals from every hut, including your own, where the hearth has reluctantly agreed to remain lit, though not enthusiastically. You shift beneath the furs, reluctant to disturb the illusion of comfort. But the reality bubbling inside your gut cannot be postponed. You sit up slowly, bones stiff from a night spent curled on reeds that have long since forgotten how to be soft. The layer of moss underneath has done little to help. It smells faintly of mildew and the goat that once slept here before you claimed the spot. She's still glaring at you from the far corner, chewing judgment into the morning air. She knows where you're going, and she's not impressed. You shuffle to your feet, limbs crackling like old kindling, your knees voicing protest in the quiet, damp hush of early day. The dirt floor is still cold, though the embers manage to keep the frost from creeping all the way in. Your foot lands in something wet, not water. You don't ask questions. There are no socks. There is only hope that it was the goat's doing and not your younger siblings. The flap of hide at the entrance breathes out a sigh of cold wind as you nudge it aside. The air outside stings your eyes awake, and your nose wrinkles as it catches the familiar scent of smoke, mud, damp wood, and something deeper. Something that smells like every meal ever eaten in this village being slowly digested by the earth itself. That would be the pit. You trudge toward it, bare feet reluctant, and heels sinking in the thick morning sludge that once aspired to be a path. The village is quiet, but not silent. A cough from one hut, a baby crying in another, the squawk of a chicken who's already having a worse morning than you. But nothing is as loud as your growing dread. The pit is ahead. You can smell it before you see it. It was dug last spring, ceremoniously and with optimism, by people who believed that if everyone agreed to use the same place, life would somehow become cleaner. It has not. It is a wide, shallow thing at the far edge of the village, surrounded by a few cracked stones and a great deal of warning scent. No fence, no lid, no instructions, just the understanding that this is where you go to contribute to the ongoing geological tragedy at the edge of your settlement. You arrive, breathing through your mouth, which only works until it doesn't. The flies have already beaten you there. They hover in lazy spirals, like they're meditating. You try not to inhale, but the pit pulls breath from you all the same. Its aroma is complex, layered. It smells like every bad choice anyone in your family has made for the last 3 weeks, and some of the good ones too. If sin had a texture, it would be this humidity. You step up onto the flat stone meant for squatting, though it wobbles with the kind of warning only ancient ancestors can send. You balance like a flamingo with stage fright, trying not to look down, and desperately hoping your toes grip better than your dignity. The wind shifts. You lose the ability to pretend you're elsewhere. There is no privacy, only the illusion granted by facing away from the village. Behind you, the chickens watch. One of them is still missing feathers from the last pit incident. You try not to think about it. The goat has followed at a distance, just far enough to make you uncomfortable. She bleats once. You consider what kind of deity might punish a person this way. As you squat, your knees tremble under the strain of both the posture and your soul. You try to relax, but the combination of uneven footing, sensory assault, and the knowledge that your cousin slipped into the pit 2 moons ago and hasn't smiled since. It all works against your body's natural processes, and yet eventually, nature wins. It always does. You finish, unceremoniously. There is no paper, no cloth, only a flat rock nearby, rounded from many similar acts of desperation, and a clump of dry moss that you suspect was left behind on purpose by someone who hates you. You make your choice. It is unwise. It is sharp. You try to not cry. You fail, just a little. When you stand, the stone shifts again, and your heart lurches. The moment you regain balance, you vow never to eat berries again, which is a lie you will repeat weekly until winter. You step back, trying to shake a glob of something unidentifiable off your heel, and glance down at the pit's surface. It moves. You don't linger. The return walk is no better. The breeze has shifted, and now the wind carries your shame back toward the huts. You pass a neighbor on their way toward the pit. They nod. You nod. It is the kind of acknowledgement one reserves for funerals or shared trauma. No words are exchanged, only the quiet understanding that neither of you is okay. Back inside your hut, the warmth feels less like comfort and more like a fever. You curl back under the hides, grateful for distance. The goat resumes her judgmental chewing. You stare at the ceiling, a collection of smoke-stained beams that look more tired than supportive, and consider how a pit, a mere hole in the earth, could so thoroughly destroy your will to live. Someone outside trips near the pit. You hear a splash. You send up a silent prayer, not out of pity, but because it wasn't you this time. The rest of the day will be spent pretending this morning didn't happen, but your body will remember. Your nostrils will remember. And next time, you will still wait too long. Because somehow, even when you know what awaits, there's still the hope that maybe it won't be quite so awful. You shift under the covers and reach to scratch your leg, only to discover that the moss had friends, and they've followed you home. The itching begins. It is not subtle. You sigh, resigned to your fate, as your little sibling mumbles in their sleep next to you, blissfully unaware of what waits for them tomorrow. Far off, another villager yelps. The pit has claimed another shoe. You close your eyes, not in peace, but in retreat. And somewhere in the back of your thoughts, the wind shifts again. This time, carrying the scent of something even older, more architectural, more organized, a scent of brick and mortar and public latrines, a soft breath of air, a whisper of clay, and the promise of civilization, and its consequences, begin to stir in your nose as Mesopotamia awaits. The wind that once carried the sour breath of a pit behind your village has given way to something heavier, warmer, more complex. Less raw earth, more baked brick. Less fermented moss, more steaming clay. And somehow, still just as bad. Civilization, as it turns out, doesn't mean cleaner. It just means the smells are now architecturally enclosed. You find yourself in the middle of a dense city, every wall sweating from the weight of sun and shared breath. The sky is a hazy smear of heat and dust, so pale it feels like someone forgot to color it in. Your sandals, rudely handmade by a cousin with one good eye and no sense of proportion, slap unevenly on the packed dirt streets, where animal dung dries beside footprints that have forgotten what privacy looks like. The buildings loom, beige and silent, broken only by hanging laundry that drips strange-colored water onto your shoulder as you pass beneath. You don't look up to see who dropped it. You know who it was, and she knows you saw. You've been holding it in for too long. Again. Because every time you tell yourself that today, you'll be brave. You'll go to the public toilet early, before the crowd arrives, before the sun heats the stones into soft clay under your thighs. And every day, you don't. You hesitate too long. You convince yourself it'll be different. But it never is. There's no pit in the corner of your yard anymore. No moss, no lichen, no vaguely judgmental goat. Now there are walls. Now there are rules. Now there is a line. The bathhouse is already full, and the toilet chamber beside it hums with humanity. Not the pleasant kind. The kind that sticks to the inside of your nostrils and finds its way into the folds of your tunic. You inch your way along the shaded side of the alley, where the heat radiating off the bricks is slightly less offensive than the full sun. There's a jug of water in your hand, not for drinking, but for the expected ritual afterward, because the sponge you used last time was no longer trustworthy. You don't think about what made it crusty. You've learned to not think at all. The entrance is narrow, more ceremonial than practical, and as you pass under the stone lintel, etched with what you assume are warnings or blessings or both, the air hits you. It's thick, not just with heat, but with decades of intention. The smell doesn't attack you. It envelops you, like an old friend who doesn't know about personal space. You step forward anyway, because you have to. There are people ahead of you, seated on the low brick benches that run along either side of the narrow room. Each bench has an opening carved into it, just large enough to be risky, just small enough to be smug about it. Between each hole, a slight ridge offers the illusion of separation, but there's nothing private about this. You join the line. You don't speak. No one does, because nothing you say in this room would survive the echo. Instead, you listen to the shuffle of feet, the occasional grunt, and the splash of water from the corner jar where someone is soaking their cleaning cloth. You brought your own, of course. You're not feral, though some of the others clearly are. The floor beneath you is slick. With what? You do not want to guess. It smells vaguely of cumin and regret. You stare at the ground and try not to breathe through your nose. The man behind you is humming softly, some ancient tune about grain or goats or maybe both. The woman ahead of you shifts her weight from foot to foot, her sandals creaking like overcooked onions. There is a baby balanced on someone's lap across the room, blinking at you with the wide eyes of someone too new to understand what they're smelling. You envy its innocence. Your turn arrives. You step forward, place your water jug beside the bench, and lower yourself with the kind of caution typically reserved for snakes or poorly trained donkeys. The brick is warm, too warm. It clings to the backs of your thighs in a way that feels like an accusation. The opening beneath you breathes upward, as though it too is participating in this communal experience. The sewer below is a marvel of engineering, so they say, but all you feel is the slow crawl of rising stink. You try not to think about who sat here before you. You try not to think about how many backsides have rested against this exact patch of brick. You fail. Completely. As you shift to find your balance, a familiar sensation returns. One you'd rather forget. The one where your tunic brushes the rim ever so slightly, and you suddenly feel the fabric is no longer yours. It has been claimed. The stone grates against your skin. You begin your business, slowly, delicately, surrounded by the gentle symphony of everyone else doing the same. A man to your left sighs, a woman to your right coughs. Somewhere further down, someone sneezes, and it echoes with comedic cruelty. The chamber is alive, buzzing with the low murmur of digestion. You finish quickly, not out of success, but necessity. And now, the wipe. You retrieve your cloth. It's damp with last night's well water, folded neatly, stained with both age and history. You press it gently, pretending you are not part of a system that requires this. You do not linger. You do not dab. You do what must be done. You rinse the cloth in the jar beside you. The water is no longer clear. You drop it in anyway. Let the next person decide their own fate. As you stand, your knees crack like sun-dried dates. The relief is mild, eclipsed by the knowledge that you'll be back tomorrow. You shuffle toward the exit, aware that your tunic still clings, that your dignity has been reduced to a faint, sticky memory. Outside, the sunlight blinds you briefly. The breeze tastes like dust, but it is your salvation. You move away from the bathhouse, away from the people, toward the quieter side of the city. A wall crumbles softly behind you. Too many summers, not enough mortar. You consider resting your back against it, but think better of it. There are places on this street where people relieve themselves informally, and walls are often involved. You keep walking. A boy rushes past you barefoot, giggling. You step aside. He is clearly on his way to the same place you just left. His cloth is trailing behind him like a flag. You whisper a wordless blessing. As you reach the shade of a nearby fig tree, you sit carefully on a stone that has not yet learned the scent of man. It is rough, cool, honest. A neighbor shuffles past, nodding once. You nod back. There are no secrets here, only survivors of the same system, the same smells, the same benches, and the same haunted glances that say, "We will speak of this never." You stare down at your jug. The water inside ripples gently with each passing step of those who still wait in line. You wonder if they know that civilization comes at a price, and sometimes that price is cheek-to-cheek humility. Somewhere far off, a breeze brings with it a different smell. Something drier, dustier. You don't know the name for it yet, but it smells like sand, heat, and limestone. There is a hint of papyrus and scorpions. The land of the Nile is calling, and you'll need to go. Again. Soon. The breeze that once carried the dust of baked brick and public shame has changed again. It is warmer now, smoother, almost sweet, if you pretend hard enough. A river whispers nearby, dragging silt and secrets across the land. You are somewhere that believes itself more civilized than all the places before it, but the smell that curls beneath your nostrils disagrees. The sun is not merely hot here, it is oppressive, deliberate, a judgment passed down from above. It presses on your scalp like a poorly made wig and seeps into your linen tunic, which sticks to your back with an intimacy you did not consent to. You shift, and it peels away from your skin like old papyrus from a damp wall. You haven't gone since morning. And morning was, well, it was unpleasant. You are beginning to realize that ancient Egypt has many luxuries, but soft toilet seating is not one of them. Nor is privacy, nor is comfort, nor, as it turns out, is mercy. You shuffle toward the far edge of the compound, your sandals filling with sand that grinds slowly between your toes like tiny, hateful millstones. The sun blazes overhead, yet somehow the latrine corner of the servants' enclosure is still cooler than the air around it. Possibly because it is carved into the shade of the stone wall, and possibly because it is the one place no one wants to linger. A woman you know only as Auntie squats nearby, holding her knees with a practiced patience. You avoid eye contact. She does not. Her stare says everything. You nod and keep walking. This is not a place for conversation. This is a place for endurance, for ritual, for accepting the decisions that brought you here. Your own toilet is simple, a low platform of clay, sun-dried and slightly crumbly around the edges, with a hollowed depression in the center. It's shaped with the enthusiasm of someone who gave up halfway through. It is not clean. It is not sacred. It is barely stable. But it is yours. For the moment. You crouch, balancing your elbows on your knees, your sandals digging into the packed dirt below. There's no seat. Only the rough, warm surface of the clay, which offers no comfort but plenty of tactile feedback. You shift forward just slightly, just enough to feel the edge of a pebble that has absolutely no business being there. You ignore it. You pretend it is a lesson in humility. The hole beneath you is dark and shallow. You know it does not lead anywhere luxurious. It will be emptied eventually by someone with a strong stomach and a low station. You pray it won't be you. Again. The smell rises slowly, like incense in reverse. It curls up from the pit in lazy spirals, sticky and deliberate, clinging to the hairs in your nose and the memory of anything you ate yesterday. You breathe through your mouth, which helps, until it doesn't. Beside you, someone has left a handful of sand-dusted reeds and a scrap of worn linen. You brought your own. Or rather, you repurposed a section of an old tunic, one that used to belong to your cousin, before he outgrew it and declared it unworthy of noble buttocks. You folded it carefully this morning. Now you question every choice you've ever made. The air shifts slightly, and a bee hums past your ear, veering dangerously close to your exposed thigh before deciding against it. You do not move. You have learned that movement attracts attention, especially here. You finish your business quickly, without pride, without celebration. It is not a task to enjoy. It is a task to survive. The wipe is unpleasant, too dry in some parts, too moist in others. The cloth leaves behind small fibers, which you will discover later and regret immediately. You rise slowly, knees popping like old barley being crushed under a stone press. You stretch, but not too far. There's still sand in your tunic, and stretching invites it to go places it should not. You reach for the small jar of water you brought, rinse your cloth with resigned ritual, and leave it draped over a nearby stone to dry and gather dust. It will never be clean again, but neither will you, really. As you step away from the latrine, you catch sight of the palace in the distance. Its limestone walls glow in the heat like the teeth of some ancient beast, perfect and indifferent. You've heard rumors, whispers really, that the pharaoh's privy is made of polished stone, cool to the touch, with steps leading up to it and servants who light incense before each use. That he sits, alone, and never once worries about splinters or biting ants or whose cloth touched what. But you are not the pharaoh. You are not even close. Your toilet is a cracked slab near the edge of a kitchen wall, guarded by a goat who seems perpetually unimpressed by your dignity. The pharaoh's privy may be sacred, ceremonial, perfumed with oils and attended by men in fine skirts, but yours is honest, humble, unapologetic. You pass by the corner where waste is carried in shallow clay basins to the edge of the riverbank, where it's dumped into the silt or buried under sand. The smell follows you like a shadow. You hope the wind shifts soon, but it doesn't. Nearby, a boy squats with his knees up to his ears, humming to himself as he fumbles with reeds. His mother swats at flies with a folded mat. You nod again, the universal gesture of shared misery. She returns it, eyes tired, mouth tight. There is no joy in this exchange, only recognition. You return to your work, hauling jars, grinding grain, sorting fish that smell marginally better than your last visit to the latrine. The hours melt under the sun's cruel attention, but even as the day drags on, part of your mind lingers there, on the clay, on the cloth, on the phantom sensation of being watched by a cat that never blinked. Night comes slowly, like a sore joint or a bad omen. The wind cools slightly. The air no longer tastes of waste, but of dust and cooling rock. You sit near the outer wall, picking your nails with a splintered stick, and watch the stars emerge one by one, blinking their indifference down upon you. Somewhere inside the palace, perhaps, a servant draws a curtain and lays out linen for the pharaoh's evening visit. Perhaps the seat is washed with scented water. Perhaps a harp is playing nearby. And still, even there, you suspect it smells just a little bit like everything else. Because in the end, no matter how divine your blood or how sacred your throne, everyone poops. You close your eyes, let your head tilt forward, and breathe in the dry scent of evening reeds. There's still sand between your toes. It will never leave. But it's quieter now, cooler. Tomorrow you'll have to go again, and it won't be any better. But for now, it's enough. The stone beneath your feet is warm, even in the morning. It holds the sun like a grudge, radiating yesterday's heat through the soles of your sandals in steady pulses. The streets are already waking, bakers muttering over ovens, carts rattling toward the market, distant voices rising above a city that never learned to whisper. Rome, for all its marble and military, smells faintly of boiled onions and very recent discomfort. And today, your discomfort has a schedule. You shouldn't have eaten the fish stew. It wasn't the fish, precisely, It was the gray, lukewarm broth that clung to the roof of your mouth like regret. You knew better. You ate it anyway. Now your gut grumbles with the dull determination of someone knocking on a locked door. So you wrap your cloak tighter, even though the air is sticky, and begin the slow shuffle toward the public latrine. You do not rush. Rushing invites accidents. You pass through the heart of the city, careful not to step in the puddles that aren't water, over cobblestones slick with something too suspicious to name. The Cloaca Maxima hums beneath the street, a vast stone artery pulsing with the city's unwanted memories. You can feel it under your feet sometimes, a distant rush, like a sigh through old bones. The public latrine is tucked beside a bathhouse, as if pretending proximity to hygiene counts as cleanliness. It is grander than most, an open space beneath a colonnade, its roof partially shaded with woven reeds that flutter with the breeze like nervous fingers. The benches are stone, curved and worn, with evenly spaced holes in long, continuous rows. A kind of military efficiency. One hole, one citizen, one shame at a time. You count 12 people already seated. Some stare straight ahead, some fiddle with their tunics, others engage in casual conversation as if defecation is a team sport. You take your place between a man chewing olives and a woman who smells faintly of perfume and aggressively of something else. She nods. You nod. You lower yourself with the solemnity of someone accepting a terrible award. The seat is cold at first, deeply, aggressively cold. It greets you like an insult from a marble ghost. The opening beneath you offers a clear view into the darkness below, where you can hear the faint, sloshing gurgle of waste being pulled away by the eternal current. The Cloaca Maxima never sleeps. It only devours. You shift forward slightly, not for comfort, there is none, but to prevent what happened last week, when a poorly judged angle led to a ricochet and a week of silent horror. A man across from you coughs and spits into a pot. Another farts with the confidence of someone long past caring. The air is thick with the tang of human effort, mingled with a note of moldy wood and ancient dampness. You breathe through your mouth and immediately regret it. To your left, someone begins talking about grain prices. You nod along, hoping the act of listening will distract you from the rough edge of the stone beneath your thighs. It does not. Nothing can. Time passes strangely in the latrine. Minutes stretch like old leather, warped by humidity and silence. You hear every drop of water, every shifting body, every accidental sound. Someone's sandal squeaks against the floor, and 4 heads turn. The man beside you exhales like a priest on fast day. Finally, you finish. Or at least your body does. Your mind remains in purgatory. Now comes the second ordeal, the sponge. The communal stick leans in a shallow trough of murky water, shared by all and loved by none. You eye it as if it might strike first. It does not. You lift it by the handle, careful to avoid the bristles, which resemble a sea creature that has seen too much. You dab with practiced detachment, hoping no one notices the expression on your face. They do. But they're polite enough to pretend they don't. When it's done, you rinse the sponge again, more out of habit than faith, and place it gently back in the trough. You pull your tunic down, careful not to brush the seat again, and step away from the bench with the weary pride of someone who has survived something shameful and necessary. Outside, the sun glares as if disappointed in your choices. You nod at the woman with the perfume. She does not nod back. You shuffle away from the latrine, your legs slightly stiff, your dignity slightly bruised. The smell clings to you. Not entirely, but enough. You know others can tell. They won't say it, but they will stand just a little farther away than they did before. You pause at a street vendor's stall and buy a handful of dates. They're sticky and sweet and full of pits, much like Rome itself. The vendor gives you a look, a knowing one. He was probably just in the latrine too. Everyone goes. but no one forgets. As you chew, you reflect on the ingenuity of it all. The sewer, the shared benches, the sponge system. Rome has made public defecation into an architectural achievement. And yet, for all its grandeur, it still feels like you're squatting in a place that disapproves of your existence. You pass by a statue of some forgotten senator, now half buried in vines. His face is carved into a permanent scowl. You wonder what his toilet looked like. Marble, probably. Private. With a servant who held incense and didn't blink. Your sandals squish faintly with each step. You tell yourself it's from the bathhouse steam. You don't believe it. Later, back at home, you change tunics. You tell yourself it was sweat. You do not smell the tunic before dropping it into the laundry basket of shame. You leave it for the slave girl who washes clothes with hands too red for her age. You nod at her on the way out. She nods back with the hollow eyes of someone who knows exactly what's in the folds of your linen. You settle into your stool near the hearth and pretend the world is clean. The floor is warm from the kitchen fire, and the walls are painted with frescoes that have faded into polite abstraction. Outside, you can hear the sound of wagons and sandals, and a goat that wandered too far down the alley. You stare into your empty cup and feel a familiar rumble in your gut. Number not again. You close your eyes and pray for the strength to wait until tomorrow. The cloaca maxima will still be there, and so will the sponge. You lean back, you exhale, and somewhere in the distance, a breeze carries the faint, wet sigh of Rome's most ancient secret. The memory of Rome hasn't entirely left your body. Some things linger, like the smell of the sponge or the damp imprint of cold stone on bare skin. You carry it with you into the new world, Greece, where the marble is polished and the olives are better. But the toilets remain resolutely disappointing. The sun greets you sideways through a thin curtain of woven goat wool, golden light cutting across the floor in clean geometry, illuminating dust like it's having an artistic moment. The floor is tiled, unevenly, but with intent. Someone tried here. They failed just enough to make it feel human. Your stomach tightens, not urgently, but ominously. It's the figs, or maybe the barley bread that somehow tasted both raw and burnt. The sensation is familiar now, a dull threat curling just beneath the surface, like the way you feel around a neighbor who borrows things and never gives them back. So you do what you must. Again, you wrap your hymation around yourself like it offers dignity, though it does not. The cloth itches faintly under your arms and smells like old beeswax and warm armpit. Sandals slapped into place, you step onto the stone pathway leading toward the public lavatory. It is technically public, but not widely advertised. It's tucked beside a modest bathhouse, camouflaged with columns and a fig tree too symmetrical to be trusted. The building is cooler than the street, shaded and echoing. Your footsteps sound louder here, too intimate against the marble. You can already hear someone sighing through their teeth behind the far wall. That's not encouraging. The air is thick with the mingling scent of oil, soap, and things no soap has ever conquered. You breathe through your nose anyway, because breathing through your mouth would be worse. Always is. The lavatory itself is a small, rectangular room with stone benches lined along 3 walls, each one carved with evenly spaced holes. The seat is slanted forward ever so slightly, a clever little design feature intended to encourage water drainage and discourage loitering. Instead, it creates a feeling of perpetual betrayal, as though the bench itself wants you off it as quickly as possible. You sit, reluctantly, balancing yourself like someone who knows gravity holds grudges. The stone is warm from the previous occupant, which is somehow worse than cold. You try not to think about who sat here last. You fail. The hole beneath you opens into a narrow drainage trench, lined with polished stone, flushed with water from a tiny trickling stream rerouted from the nearby bathhouse. It burbles like it's trying to be helpful. It isn't. To your left, someone clears their throat with theatrical misery. You glance without meaning to. It's a man with a philosophical beard and a complete lack of shame. He makes eye contact. You do not. Instead, you stare straight ahead at the mural painted on the wall. A cluster of nymphs frolicking by a river. They all seem far too relaxed for what's happening here. Your knees ache slightly from the squat. Not quite sitting, not quite hovering. The slanted seat presses unkindly into your thighs. Your toes grip the edge of the tile floor like that will keep you steady. It won't. Nothing here wants you steady. You shift your weight. The seat squeaks against your skin. Someone on the opposite bench lets out a breath that can only be described as spiritual release. You make a mental note to never eat olives again. You will forget this by tomorrow. To your right, a young man hums softly to himself. It's a tune you recognize, a temple song, meant to be soothing. It isn't. Nothing about synchronized defecation accompanied by a melodic dirge feels sacred. Eventually, the deed is done. The relief is physical, but fleeting. Now comes the part where you search for something to cleanse with. There are no sponges here. Just a shallow bowl of water and a pile of pebbles, worn smooth from years of service. You select 3 stones, because that's the unspoken rule. 1 for the bulk, 1 for the polish, 1 for luck. You hope they haven't been reused. You don't ask. You never ask. The process is delicate, but not gentle. The stones do their job with all the tenderness of a lecture on stoicism. You grit your teeth. You rinse them in the basin and place them back in the pile like cursed relics. Your hand smells like disappointment and minerals. You will wash later. You will never feel clean. You rise slowly, knees clicking like castanets, and tie your hymation tighter than before, as if fabric alone can contain the memory of what just happened. You step toward the exit, careful not to touch the walls. They look clean, but you know better. Outside, the sunlight is too bright. The street bustles as if nothing grotesque has ever happened behind that columned wall. You step into the rhythm of daily life again, your body lighter, your spirit fractionally more burdened. At a stall, you buy honey-dipped barley cakes. You're not hungry, but food is a distraction, and you're already mentally erasing the last hour. The vendor hands you the cake with fingers stained by something unidentifiable. You take it anyway. The walk home is long and uneventful. You think about philosophy, mostly to avoid thinking about anything else. Socrates once said the unexamined life is not worth living. You think perhaps the over-examined toilet is not worth sitting on. Back at your modest home, you pour a basin of water and scrub your hands with an olive oil paste that leaves your palms greasy and smelling faintly like resignation. A neighbor passes by your door and waves. You wave back, awkwardly. You suspect she heard your moan earlier. You suspect everyone did. The house cat curls near your sandals and squints up at you with vague judgment. You wonder if animals have it better. Probably. They at least have the luxury of privacy and dirt. As you recline on the couch, sipping watered wine from a clay cup chipped at the rim, you try to reflect on how advanced everything is. Greece has math, music, medicine, architecture, democracy. And yet, the place where you must bear yourself is still designed by someone who clearly hated people. The sun dips lower, casting golden rectangles across the wall. You feel the first hints of digestion again, somewhere deep and terrible. Not yet, but soon. You sigh through your nose and let the room settle into stillness. Outside, a rooster crows for no reason. Inside, you breathe slowly. You made it through another day, another seat, another system of communal shame masquerading as civilized plumbing. And tomorrow, if the barley disagrees again, you'll return to that stone bench, angled just enough to remind you that balance, like privacy, is a myth. For now, the breeze cools your skin. You stretch your legs. You close your eyes. and far off, somewhere in the distance, a chamber pot clinks gently against stone. You've tried to convince yourself that at least this time you don't have to go outside. No clattering outhouse door. No wind that aims straight for your most vulnerable parts. No squatting like an animal with your feet slowly sinking into frozen soil. This time, it's indoors. And somehow, that makes it worse. The room is quiet, except for the dying crackle of a hearth too stubborn to die, but too lazy to warm anything more than its immediate stones. You're huddled beneath wool blankets, knees drawn up. The rushes underfoot smell faintly of old cabbage and damp shoes. They were changed last month, which, in medieval terms, counts as freshly cleaned. Your gut makes a sound that isn't so much a complaint as it is a warning. You know the kind. Not immediate, but definite. Like a distant storm that's decided which tree it's going to strike. You lie very still. Maybe it'll pass. Maybe it was just the salted herring, or the turnip mash that seemed a little too enthusiastic yesterday. But no, it's happening. Slowly, inevitable, with the confidence of a nobleman barging through a peasant's front door. And so begins the quiet pilgrimage to the corner, the chamber pot. It sits humbly beside the bed, half hidden under a linen cloth that pretends it's something more than it is. It is not. It is a bowl, a bucket, a vessel of misfortune. It has chipped edges and a handle that's somehow always a little sticky. You suspect it once belonged to someone with higher aspirations, perhaps soup-related. But its fate was sealed by proximity and convenience. You toss the covers back. The air bites like betrayal. The stone floor is colder than any natural material should be, like it was forged from winter's last breath. You shuffle to the pot, your shift clinging to you with a dampness you'd rather not question. Your breath fogs. The candle flickers judgmentally. Squatting is a full-body endeavor. Nothing in your legs wants to cooperate. Your knees creak like a church door. Your ankles wobble. The pot wobbles. You try to steady yourself with one hand on the bed frame, but that feels like it violates some invisible law of domestic dignity. You are not sure when you last had dignity, but you know this isn't it. And there it is. That horrible moment where you must release your body, while knowing full well that the pot is not designed to muffle sound. Nothing is masked. Nothing is forgiven. The chamber pot records everything with cruel acoustics. The room echoes faintly. You hope the others are asleep. You know they are not. You don't look back, but you can feel your cousin shift under the pile of skins across the room. She says nothing. Mercifully. You both pretend this never happened, just as you pretended it didn't the night before, and the night before that. The smell is immediate. Earthy, sharp, with the strange sweetness of something that once resembled food, but no longer wishes to be associated with it. You reach for the rag beside the pot. Rough, stiff, previously used. You hesitate. You always hesitate. And then you use it anyway, because there's nothing else. You place the cloth back gently, as if that might undo what it now knows. The pot is heavy, more than it was yesterday. Someone else used it earlier and did not empty it. You suspect your brother, whose sense of responsibility is proportional to the moon's willingness to stay in one place. You should carry it out, to the midden heap, or the privy trench if you're feeling charitable. But it's night, and cold, and the floor is already punishing enough. You tuck the pot back under the bed like a secret, like a cursed artifact. Its contents will remain until morning, or until someone trips on it and reopens the gates of hell. You crawl back into bed with a sigh that smells faintly of guilt and defeat. The wool blanket has cooled in your absence, and it no longer welcomes you. It scolds. The fire sputters its final orange breath. You curl into yourself and try not to inhale too deeply. Somewhere in the dark, the goat stirs. You forgot the goat was inside again. You're not sure if it's warmer with her here or just smellier. She shifts and lets out a small, accusatory snort, probably offended that you didn't offer her the bedpan. Probably would have used it better. Above you, the wooden beams groan as though resenting the weight of another winter. The wind presses against the shutters, testing their resolve. You hear the neighbor cough in their sleep. It's a wet sound. You wonder if they'll survive until spring. You stare at the ceiling and feel the weight of every unpleasant detail pressing down like an extra blanket made entirely of inconvenience. You think distantly about castles and royalty, about stone privies that jut out over rivers, where one could relieve oneself directly into flowing water with some illusion of grace. But those are dreams. You are a chamber pot person. You live among others who squat in corners and pretend not to hear one another doing the same. The pot remains under the bed like a loaded threat, waiting to be knocked, smelled, or ignored until someone becomes the martyr. You will not be that martyr. Not tonight. Your stomach grumbles again, less urgently this time. A warning shot, perhaps. Or a reminder that life is, at its most basic level, a long series of compromises involving temperature, dignity, and proximity to waste. You pull the blanket up to your chin. You try not to think about the stone lip of the pot or the sensation of icy porcelain meeting warm flesh. You try not to recall the way your cousin once missed and blamed it on the dark. You try not to breathe. Sleep comes slowly, curled beside the ghost of your own discomfort. You lie still, wrapped in wool and shame and the quiet knowledge that you'll do it all again tomorrow. Perhaps with more grace, perhaps not. The fire goes out, the goat sighs, and somewhere beneath the bed, the chamber pot waits, faithful, filthy, ready. The scent of last night's stew still clings faintly to the rafters, even though the fire has long since gone out. You shift beneath the stiff woolen blanket, scratch at the place behind your knee that refuses to stop itching, and remember, too late, that you forgot to empty the chamber pot before bed. Again. It sits beside the wall in silent accusation, half full and already daring you to trip over it in the dark. But this morning, you've resolved to be better. You will not shuffle through the day, hunched and bloated like a tragic medieval gargoyle. No, today you will face the courtyard privy. Outside, the world is unwelcoming in the very specific way that winter mornings always are. Damp, cruel, and unnecessarily enthusiastic about wind. You pull on your boots, still slightly damp from yesterday's failed attempt at drying them near the hearth, and they make that horrible cold slap against your heel that always makes your soul try to leave your body. Your cloak, heavy and sour with the musk of damp wool and smoke, offers little protection, but you clutch it around your shoulders anyway, like a child hiding under a blanket from some ancient outhouse demon. You trudge across the packed dirt floor of the cottage, unlatch the swollen wooden door with frozen fingers, and step out into a courtyard that is mostly mud pretending to be ground. The path to the privy is not long, but it is long enough. Long enough for the cold to settle through your cloak and into your bones. Long enough for the mud to grab at your feet, like a passive-aggressive relative. Long enough for you to wonder why your ancestors thought indoor toilets were some sort of decadent luxury instead of a basic human kindness. But most of all, it's long enough for you to remember the rat. The rat is not imaginary. You've seen it before. Or maybe it's a rotating cast of rats, sharing one shaggy brown costume and a sense of deeply personal disdain. It lives near the privy, or perhaps within it, though you try not to think about the logistics of that. Last week it locked eyes with you through the half-rotted wooden slats and didn't blink. You're fairly certain it judged you. Harshly. You arrive at the door. It is barely a door, really. More a suggestion of privacy, flimsily nailed together and swollen from years of rain. The latch sticks. Of course it does. Your numb fingers fumble, slip, swear silently. When it finally yields, the door creaks open with the kind of sound that announces your shame to the entire village. Inside, the smell greets you like an old friend who doesn't understand personal space. It's not the raw, eye-watering stench of something freshly awful. It's worse. It's old, matured, settled into the wood, a deep, sour funk of generations. The scent has seen things. The hole, crudely carved into a splintered bench, is dark and deep. The pit below hidden in shadow and mystery, like some unholy wishing well where the coins are replaced by regret and gastrointestinal distress. You lower yourself slowly, carefully, trying to avoid the roughest splinters, the slickest surfaces, the worst possible outcomes. The wood is cold. Not just cold, maliciously cold. It holds the chill of weeks, of frost, of poor decisions made by people long dead and best forgotten. As you settle onto the seat, the icy wood meets flesh, and your whole body flinches in betrayal. The cloak bunches behind you, exposing your back to the wind that finds its way through every crack and knothole. You regret every choice that led you to this moment, including last night's third helping of turnip stew. The pit beneath seems bottomless, not in the romantic, poetic way, in the horrifying, physics-defying way. Things go in. They do not come out. You listen to the subtle sounds below, an occasional plop, the soft skitter of something unseen, the distant groan of the earth contemplating whether to reclaim this structure entirely. You make yourself small, tense, hovering between necessity and dread. You think of the rat. Is it here now, behind the bench, beneath it, watching? You keep your eyes straight ahead, focused on the warped wooden wall with the strange carved face someone once thought was charming. It is not charming. There's a damp patch at your feet. You hope it's just mud. It smells like it's not. You decide not to investigate. A gust of wind pushes the door open slightly, just enough for a shaft of cold light to cut across your lap and remind you that even nature wants you to feel exposed. You lean forward and push the door closed with your boot, and the latch gives up entirely, swinging open again as if to say, "Privacy is for nobles." You tug your cloak higher, hunched like a medieval mushroom, waiting for the moment to pass. A chicken clucks somewhere nearby. You don't know why that makes it worse, but it does. Time stretches. You try not to breathe too deeply. You try not to shift too much. The bench groans under you like it remembers every other behind that sat here and is judging them all equally. You consider what it might be like to have a latrine inside, or even a thunder jug under the bed. But then you remember the neighbor's toddler and what they did to last week's thunder jug. You stay put. Mostly. When it's over, you rise carefully, stiffly. There is no toilet paper. Of course not. You reach for the rough cloth someone has hung on a nail, fraying and stiff with mystery. You use it quickly and try not to think too hard. It feels like wiping with burlap and past trauma. You rewrap yourself in your cloak and glance one last time into the abyss. The rat does not appear. This time. Outside, the air feels marginally better, though it still smells like mud, smoke, and disappointment. The sky is gray in that particular way that promises no sun and no warmth, only a sort of damp, lingering misery. You step carefully along the path, boots squelching with each reluctant step. Your heel slips once, just enough to remind you that the mud will take you if it wants to. You right yourself and trudge on. Back inside, the cottage is barely warmer, but it feels like a victory. You close the door, drop your cloak in a heap, and breathe through your mouth. The chamber pot still waits, untouched. You look at it, then at the door, and then back again. Not today. You've been brave enough for one morning. Somewhere near the hearth, your sibling mutters in their sleep. The goat bleats indignantly from outside, as though it too disapproves of your early adventure. You settle onto your straw bedding and pull the blanket back over your legs, which are now just numb enough to feel warm by contrast. The cold has soaked into your bones, but your bladder is empty, and that feels like progress. In the stillness, You begin to wonder what it must be like in the castles, the fancy places, the ones with stone walls and tapestries, and not a single rat privy in sight. You imagine their version of a toilet, and how it must be so much more elegant, refined, and sanitary. You imagine a gentle breeze in a seat with no splinters, but then again, a hole in a wall hanging over a moat might come with problems of its own, and with that soft, uncertain thought, your breath begins to slow. The mud fades into memory, and the wind tugs faintly at the edge of your dreams. The wind hasn't quite left you since the courtyard. It lingers in your cloak and in the fine layer of skin just beneath your fingernails, the kind of chill that becomes a resident rather than a visitor. Even as you settle into the relative comfort of the castle's thick stone walls, there is no warmth, only a different kind of cold. A grander, more prestigious kind. One that echoes in the hallways and radiates from the slabs of quarried limestone, whispering reminders that status does not make things more comfortable, just colder in higher ceilings. The fire in the main hall pops intermittently, but the warmth it promises dissolves a few feet from its stone mouth. You inch toward it, but the smoke spirals in unpredictable gusts, catching in the back of your throat like a dry cough that never quite arrives. Somewhere behind you, the steward is muttering to himself about spoiled meat and kitchen boys with lazy fingers. The scent of last night's feast still clings to the beams, grease and overboiled cabbage mingling in a cloud of aristocratic indigestion. The air itself is heavy, stale, too full of history and trapped farts from centuries past. Your stomach clenches with the slow, deliberate logic of someone who's made a poor dietary decision. It was the mutton, or perhaps the thick ale, which you drank too quickly in an attempt to dull the draft pouring in from under the doors. Regardless, the reckoning has come. And here, in the grandeur of castle life, that means one thing: the garderobe. You dread it even before you leave your bench. Even before you tighten your belt and pull your wool tunic closer, you know what's coming. You steel yourself for the journey, through damp corridors, over uneven stones slick with moss, past tapestries that try and fail to block the wind like expensive curtains made of cold burlap. You pass a servant carrying a stack of linens so high it obscures their face. Just behind them, a dog limps through the hallway, tail down, eyes half shut, as if it too knows exactly where you're going. The hallway narrows and you follow it, trailing your hand along the wall's rough edge for balance, until you reach the small arched door that might generously be called the garderobe. It's really more of an elevated cubby that overhangs the outer wall. From outside, it would appear charming. From inside, it feels like a cruel joke carved into masonry. You open the door with the kind of reverence usually reserved for crypts and poorly kept secrets. Inside, it is exactly as you remember. Stone bench, small square opening, faint trace of mildew, and a chill that doesn't just enter you, but seems to rise up from within. You step inside and the cold immediately begins its crawl. From toes to thighs, it moves like smoke made of needles. The bench is worn, smooth in a way that only time and many, many behinds could create. There is no cushioning, of course. That would imply compassion. Instead, there's just stone, unforgiving, slightly concave, and already damp. You lower yourself slowly, knees cracking with betrayal, and place your skin against the ancient surface as though making contact with a ghost. It is so cold, your muscles spasm in protest. You breathe shallowly through your mouth to avoid tasting the air, which carries the subtle perfume of damp limestone and every regret that's ever fallen through the hole beneath you. That hole. You do not look into it, but you feel it. It gapes below you, open to the outer wall of the castle, a direct vertical shaft that drops down into the moat, or, if the wind is right, into someone else's bad day. It is an architectural marvel if your standards for marvels include sudden drafts and fecal exposure. Today, the breeze finds its way up with uncanny precision. It slithers along your thighs and back like a curious eel, then circles your hips like it's looking for somewhere to settle in. Your cloak flaps uselessly against your legs. The sound of the wind through the hole is worse than the cold. It moans like something between a haunted flute and a dying cow. You sit there, trying to relax, but the moment refuses to become routine. Instead, you hover in a state of full-body tension, like a paranoid owl on a perch made of frozen misery. Every creak of the stone behind you, every bird call echoing from the courtyard, every shift of your own weight becomes a potential embarrassment or tragedy. You do not want to fall. You do not want to slip. You do not want to join whatever lies at the bottom of the moat, becoming some historical footnote in the annals of indoor plumbing attempts. There is no privacy. Not really. The door doesn't latch properly. It sways gently with each gust, as if to remind you that the concept of alone time in a medieval castle is as mythical as personal hygiene. You hear distant voices echoing through the stone, a steward's complaint, a page's laughter, the clattering of pots. Someone, somewhere, coughs with the kind of wet finality that suggests they've been coughing for years. You wait, unmoving, hoping the wind stops long enough to allow you a moment of quiet dignity. It doesn't. Of course it doesn't. When the deed is done, you search with frozen fingers for the wiping solution du jour. There is no roll of anything, just a scrap of cloth, vaguely gray, with edges that curl like burnt toast. You use it carefully, gingerly, with all the enthusiasm of someone removing a slug from their own sock. It's rough, damp, and smells faintly of soap and failure. You hang it back on its nail because that is what one does. Everyone pretends it's clean. Everyone knows it isn't. You stand, slowly, like an old tower trying not to crumble. Your knees argue with the effort. Your thighs scream silently. You step away from the seat, pulling your tunic back down and adjusting your belt with trembling fingers. A sudden gust lifts the bottom hem of your cloak and slaps it across your shins. You close the door behind you with an embarrassed shuffle, like you're trying to sneak out of a party you never wanted to attend. The hallway feels warmer by comparison, though that is only an illusion. Your feet slap against the stone in wet protest. Somewhere ahead, a servant lights a torch that barely flickers. The walls sweat cold moisture. Your body does too. You pass back through the great hall where a few nobles sit near the hearth, noses red and expressions blank. They don't look at you, but you know they know. Everyone knows. The garderobe leaves a kind of shadow on your soul, a private humiliation that everyone carries publicly. Your sibling glances up from a stool in the corner, chewing something beige. They say nothing, but you can see it in their eyes. They went before you, and they're not impressed. You sit down again on the bench near the fire, though it offers no more warmth than before. Still, it feels like shelter. You exhale. The wind moans through the tower stones like it's still searching for someone to haunt. You tuck your feet beneath your cloak and let your mind drift upward, toward the rafters, toward the imagined future where toilets have seats and doors and dignity. But of course, you're not there yet. You're still here, still chilled, still mildly traumatized by stone benches and wind tunnels and a pit that whispers like it remembers every mistake ever made. And in the next room, just down the stairs, a chambermaid is folding sheets and humming tunelessly, completely unaware that tonight you might just choose the jug under the bed instead. You're still tender, not emotionally, though perhaps that too, but physically, in a way that makes every step feel like a soft protest. The cold stone seat of the garderobe has long since stopped being part of your day, yet it lingers like an aftertaste. You walk differently now, a little wider, a little slower, as though you've learned the truth of what medieval life demands and are trying not to repeat it too soon. Back near the fire, the bench creaks as you ease yourself down. The cushion is a flattened pillow of straw, wrapped in something that once resembled fabric, now closer to woven dust. You sit gently, tenderly, aware of each contact point. Your hands hover over your lap, unsure what to do now that the crisis has passed. There is no tea. There is no warm blanket. There is only the chill that seeped into your bones and refuses to check out, as though your body is a cheap inn, and discomfort is an overdue guest. The fire snaps once, then again. You blink slowly. Around you, people pretend not to notice the smell that still clings faintly to your wool. You pretend not to notice the faint itch on the back of your thigh that might be guilt or might be mildew. No one comments. This is how shame is carried, quietly, in the folds of your tunic, in the slight slump of your shoulders, in the faint squirm that no one acknowledges but everyone recognizes. You replay it in your mind, the worst part. Not the cold bench, not the hole in the stone floor. No, it was what came after. The moment when you realized there was no soft reprieve waiting, no cloth, no paper, no luxury of cotton spun into kindness. Just options. That's all you had. A range of natural textures, each worse than the last. You had to choose, and you did. But you are not at peace with it. You think of what was nearby. First came hay, crisp, golden, full of promise. But promise, you now know, is sharp. It crumbles into stiff shards that find every wrong angle. Hay is not soft. It does not bend with sympathy. It does not understand your delicate regions. It stabs. It splinters. It scratches with the enthusiasm of 1,000 tiny knives doing their worst impression of hygiene. You grabbed it because it was there, because it looked innocent, because you were desperate. But it betrayed you the moment it touched skin. Hay has no remorse. Then came the straw. Slightly darker, slightly more forgiving, but only in comparison. Straw is thicker, yes, and somewhat smoother in its cruelty. But it doesn't absorb. It pushes. It nudges. It smears. It creates art where none is wanted. You used it anyway, because what else were you going to do? Waddle across the hall looking for moss. Straw is like a terrible friend. It helps you in a crisis, but leaves you worse than it found you. There were leaves once, a pile of them, curling gently near the base of the outer wall, kissed with morning frost and the faint scent of decay. You considered them. You even touched one. It crumbled into disappointment in your hand. Leaves are poetic in theory and papery in practice. They do not hold up under pressure or moisture. You let them be. Moss came to mind, eventually. It always does. The mythical moss. Soft, spongy, almost inviting. But moss is rare this time of year. It hides in the shadowed corners of the woods and grows in clusters too small to be useful. The one time you did find it, you used it like a gift, only to discover too late that it harbored something. Something that moved. You haven't trusted it since. There was an old rag hanging from a peg, stained in ways that tell a story you don't want to read. You looked at it. It looked back. You moved on. And so, when faced with limited choices and even more limited time, you settled on a compromise. A handful of straw, softened between your palms, slightly dampened with water that smelled faintly of iron and mud. You did what needed to be done. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't effective. But it was something. And now here you are, alive, raw, and aware that somewhere in the future, someone will invent something better. But not for you. Not yet. Your sibling walks by with a knowing smirk. They carry a bucket and wear mittens that look hand-knitted but feel like sandpaper. You exchange no words. None are needed. There is a shared understanding, a shared discomfort, a quiet competition of who suffered less, which is to say, who suffered more gracefully. Neither of you wins. There are no winners here, only survivors. Outside, the wind kicks up again. You watch it curl along the ground, stirring the hay in the corner, the same hay you cursed mere hours ago. It lifts slightly, dancing in the air like a memory trying to make itself look prettier than it was. You know better. You remember the sting. You think of the future again, of fabrics that cushion, of flushes that whisk things away, of soap that smells like lavender instead of fear. But then the fire pops and you're brought back to now, to the woolen tunic that never dries, to the straw-filled seat that pokes in all the wrong places, to the itching that won't stop no matter how long you shift in your place. You try to adjust. The cushion is lumpy, uneven, possibly home to a few ants. You think you feel one, or maybe that's just your imagination, now forever haunted by the tactile memories of what you've done. You make peace with the idea that comfort is a myth best left to nobility, and even they are one windy outhouse away from the same humiliation. There's a scraping sound outside. A goat, probably. Or your neighbor dragging a pail of something that should have been dumped yesterday. You try not to look. Some things are better unseen, much like the cloth rag, much like your own hand after the straw failed to perform its sole duty. A breeze sneaks in through the cracks in the door. It carries the scent of damp earth, manure, and smoked meat, all of which somehow blend into the aroma of your life. You inhale it with the resignation of someone who no longer expects anything better. You shift again. The itch has moved. You regret everything. Later, you'll have to clean your hands in the stream. It will be freezing. The soap, if you can call it that, is a gray lump with a smell that hints at ashes and spoiled milk. It never really lathers. It just spreads around the shame. But you'll use it anyway, because the alternative is not using it. And that feels worse. You remember once hearing of a traveler who used feathers, soft goose down, plucked from underbelly or wing. You can't imagine how they stayed intact, or clean. But you dream of them now, not as tools, but as symbols. Feather-soft cleanliness. A fantasy too tender for this world. A child runs past, laughing, clutching a stick coated with something you hope is just mud. Behind them, a cart creaks down the lane, its wheels caked with the layered history of other people's digestion. You close your eyes for a moment. Try to pretend that your past hour never happened, but the straw has left its mark. Literally. You shift once more, and the itch returns. Perhaps you'll try the moss again tomorrow, or that scrap of cloth if it dries in time. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll finally convince someone to weave rags solely for this purpose. A luxury, yes, but even luxuries start somewhere, like ideas, like desperate prayers whispered over firewood and fading pride. And so, you lean back just a little, not too far. The bench is still untrustworthy. You let your eyes drift to the rafters, where a spider spins something elegant in a world where you are anything but. And as the fire hisses and your leg starts to cramp, you wonder idly what tomorrow might demand from you. Maybe, if you're lucky, it won't involve straw. The straw is still clinging to your skin in places straw should never cling. You shift on the hard wooden bench near the fire, the heat of it both welcome and slightly too enthusiastic, like being embraced by an over-friendly ant who smells of turnips and singed wool. You survived the last ordeal, though survived might be generous. Endured, perhaps. Barely. But now your knees ache. Your pride has gone off to hide in some dark corner of the thatched roof, and you're thinking that maybe the monastic life has its appeal after all. Fewer children, less shouting, and a routine so fixed it might actually beat back the chaos. But you're not ready for what their silence conceals. It starts with a borrowed robe, scratchy, a little too short in the arms, and suspiciously damp around the hem. You drape it over your shoulders as if it might make you wise, or at least warm, but it offers little of either. You follow the stone path toward the monastery like someone headed to a better life. You are not. The morning air is misty, the kind of cold that clings to your eyelashes and seeps through your wool layers like regret through a confessional screen. Your breath fogs in front of you like smoke from a fire that never quite caught. It smells faintly of onions, or possibly you. Inside the cloister walls, all is quiet, profoundly quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a rule. Your footsteps echo against ancient stone, and you become suddenly, acutely aware of how much noise you make just by existing. The monks glide past like soft, judgmental shadows, bare feet on cold slabs, robes brushing against walls like whispers in Latin. No one speaks. No one smiles. You begin to miss the distant sound of goats arguing over turnips. The latrines are not hidden. They are not even discreet. They're part of the rhythm, part of the order. One among many rituals of the day, like prayer or bread or apologizing internally for having a body at all. You are directed, not spoken to, just gently steered by a raised brow and a knowing nod to a corridor that smells of damp limestone and something less divine. You follow, because not following would make a sound. The monastic latrine is a long stone bench, broken only by evenly spaced holes, each one yawning like the mouth of a sinner waiting for confession. There is no privacy, no curtain, no nook, not even a badly hung tapestry of some saint who understands the plight of the constipated. Just a row of openings carved directly above a slow-moving channel of water, which gurgles beneath your feet, like a stream that lost its will to live. The sound is subtle but present, a reminder that everything eventually goes somewhere, even your dignity. You lower yourself carefully. The stone is cold, not just cold, ancient cold. Cold with the memory of every person who ever sat here, going back centuries. Cold like punishment, cold like penance. You wince, but quietly, because even your bodily complaints must be devout. Around you, the monks remain still, statues in brown wool, eyes closed or gazing vaguely at nothing, as though evacuating one's bowels is merely an extension of prayer. You, however, are less enlightened. You are shivering, clenching, and trying not to hyperventilate as your backside presses against what might as well be a granite tomb. There is no straw, no moss, no ragged cloth. In the corner lies a single wooden stick with a sponge lashed to the end, shared presumably by everyone. Communal cleanliness, monastic humility. You stare at it like it's a relic of martyrdom. It is damp, slightly greenish. You think about touching it, and your soul briefly leaves your body. You shift again, knees cracking, and the stone sends a warning jolt up your spine. You try to focus on your breathing, like you've seen the monks do. Inhale, exhale. Ignore the smell. Ignore the moisture creeping up your thighs. Ignore the fact that someone next to you is clearly doing this with serene composure while you resemble a dying crab. You wonder if monks are trained for this. If they pass down secrets, like where to sit to avoid splashing, or how to balance just right so your robe doesn't dip into the canal of eternal shame. Your own robe flutters dangerously, and you clutch it to your chest with one hand like modesty might save you. It won't. You've already seen too much, and felt too much, especially of the bench. The silence deepens. It isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It presses against your ears like the weight of unspoken judgment. Even your breathing sounds disrespectful now. You realize slowly that this place is not for comfort. It is for humility. And you, with your twitching thighs and clenched regrets, are being taught a lesson. Your stomach gurgles, loudly. The monks don't flinch. But you swear one of them raised an eyebrow, just slightly, as though your digestion were a heresy. You try to shift again, and your foot skids slightly on the wet stone floor. You catch yourself, barely, and in doing so, knock the sponge stick onto your ankle. You consider dying immediately. The sensation is brief, but eternal. Cool, slimy, soft in the wrong way. You hold back a scream, not out of self-control, but because the idea of making a sound in this place is more terrifying than death. You brush it off. You wipe your foot on your robe. You pray. Not to be forgiven, but simply to be allowed to forget. When you are done, if you can call what happened being done, you rise slowly. Your knees creak. Your hips whisper dark things to your spine. You bow slightly, because it seems like the thing to do. The monks continue to sit, unmoving, as though they are still waiting for divine inspiration, or for their beans to settle. You walk away in silence, leaving behind whatever part of your soul now lives in that stone bench. Your footfalls echo again in the corridor. A breeze follows you, scented with lavender and penance, or maybe just mold. The robe clings to your damp leg in solidarity, and you swear you hear the gurgling canal laugh beneath the floor. Back outside, the cold is almost refreshing. It scrapes away the last wisps of stink clinging to your hair, though it cannot touch the memory. That, you suspect, will outlive even the monastery walls. You return the robe to its peg, where it droops with the resignation of a garment that has seen too much. Your skin still crawls. Your nose twitches with phantom smells. But at least the silence has loosened. Somewhere a goat bleats. A child shrieks. The world remembers you again. You head homeward with small steps, careful ones, the kind that suggest you've gained some kind of wisdom. Not the good kind, just the kind that smells like humility and mossy sticks. The next time someone says monastic life is pure, you will smile quietly, and then tell them about the sponge. And as the stone walls of the monastery fade into the mist behind you, and your own little firelit hovel comes into view, you sigh, deep, slow, and just a little haunted. Tomorrow, you've heard, brings buckets, and other people's secrets. You make it home just before dusk, legs sore from too many stairs, shoulders burdened not by weight, but by knowledge. The monastery latrine, cold and contemplative, has given you something you didn't ask for, an experience that clings to the inside of your ribs like damp wool. You sit for a long time near the hearth, where the heat barely reaches past your ankles, and stare at the corner where your own chamber pot lives, lid slightly askew, like a secret that knows it's about to be found out. And sure enough, night arrives, which means so does the bucket. No one truly volunteers for the bucket. It's more of an inheritance, passed down when someone older feigns a limp or suddenly remembers they're fasting. You are not clever enough to escape. Or perhaps you're simply the youngest, which means it's your turn until someone smaller is born or conveniently grows opposable thumbs. The chamber pot is made of cheap tin and poorer judgment. It has dents where someone, possibly you, once tripped over it in the dark. It holds things you'd rather not describe, though you could, in great and terrible detail. It's full. Not dangerously full, but full enough that you have to tilt it slightly when you walk, like a waiter with a tray of wine glasses in a thunderstorm. Except no one wants what's inside, not even the ground. You drape a cloak over your shoulders, thick, stiff, and still damp from yesterday's mist, and begin the descent. The stairs are steep and unforgiving, worn smooth by generations of similarly burdened feet. The bucket sloshes softly with each step, the contents thick enough to sound viscous. You've learned to take the turns slowly. Last time you went too fast and nearly baptized the banister in familial shame. No one mentioned it, but someone left a mop beside the door that week. Outside, the alley is dark in that particular urban way. Too narrow for moonlight, too busy for silence. Cobblestones glisten with moisture that might be rain but probably isn't. You keep to the wall, one hand gripping the stone, the other cradling the bucket like a newborn made of nightmares. A cat watches you from a windowsill with the dead-eyed stare of someone who knows what's coming. At this hour, the city speaks only in whispers. A door creaking, a rat scuttling, the faint sigh of a man trying to quietly relieve himself into a gutter without waking his landlord. Everyone pretends not to see each other. You pass another soul on the same errand, nodding with mutual respect. It's a silent club of the unwilling, bonded by shame and the slosh of shared burden. The designated dumping spot is at the end of the alley, just before the curve that leads to the market square. It's not marked, but everyone knows it. The stones there are permanently stained. The smell lives in your throat before you even arrive. You glance up instinctively, because it's also where the second-floor dwellers empty theirs, less carefully, more vertically. A warning cough from above is your only alert. Tonight, there's nothing falling. Yet. You kneel, not in reverence, but in resignation. You remove the lid with the caution of a bomb technician and pour the contents slowly, careful not to splash. The sound is worse than the act. A thick, gloopy echo that fills the alley with the wet shame of 5 people's digestion. You can identify meals in it. You wish you couldn't. As you rinse the bucket with a ladle of murky water from the communal trough, you hear a familiar rustle behind a shutter. Mrs. Benevolence, who is neither benevolent nor technically your neighbor, watches from the shadows, a judgmental silhouette behind frosted glass. She hasn't taken her own bucket down in years, but she always seems to be awake when others do. Her curtain twitches. You nod politely to the darkness, and the curtain twitches again. The bucket now emptied, you begin the ascent. It's heavier than before, which seems unfair. Maybe it's just the psychological weight. Your fingers are red from gripping the handle too tightly, the metal biting into your skin like punishment. You pause halfway up the stairs to catch your breath. Not because the task is exhausting, though it is, but because it's one of those rare moments when you are utterly alone in your effort, and the silence lets you notice it. Back inside, the warmth of the hearth is deceptive. It never reaches the places that matter. Your knees ache. Your toes are damp from stepping in something on the stair landing. You tell yourself it was just water. It wasn't. You return the bucket to its corner, lid askew once more, like a bad secret that refuses to stay buried. Someone will fill it again by morning, probably before sunrise. That someone might be you. It usually is. You think about adding a second pot to the household, but where would it go? Besides, then you'd have 2 to empty. The room smells faintly of cabbage and defeat. The fire pops half-heartedly, trying to be comforting but mostly sounding like a damp shrug. A draft wiggles its way beneath the door and over your ankles, like a tiny ghost begging for socks. You sit, and the wooden bench complains under your weight. Or perhaps it's simply echoing your sentiment. Your hands still smell of tin, even though you wash them twice with cold water and the soap that crumbles into dust if you look at it too hard. You rub them on your cloak, which doesn't help. And now your cloak smells like regret too. There is something noble about the night soil men, you think. The professionals. The ones who come with barrels and strong backs, and a look in their eyes that says they've seen everything and still manage to eat lunch afterward. You wonder what it's like to do this for other people, for a living, for money. You shudder, not at the thought of filth, but at the sheer routine of it. Your own routine is bad enough. Outside, the alley creaks again. Another poor soul on the same mission. A bucket sloshes. A sigh follows. You feel less alone. Not better, but understood. You stretch, bones clicking, and pull a threadbare blanket over your lap. Your clothes still smell faintly of night soil. You try not to breathe too deeply. The fire's glow flickers across the ceiling in patterns that might be calming if you didn't know what was trapped beneath your fingernails. Tomorrow is laundry day. Or it would be if the stream weren't frozen and your hands weren't already raw. You'll soak the cloth, rinse the pot, and repeat the ritual all over again by evening. The bucket will not clean itself, nor will the stains on your pride. As the fire fades into a soft red ember and the air grows thick with sleep and soot, you close your eyes and wonder if upstairs someone is considering tossing theirs from the window without looking. And just before you drift off, your last thought is this: at least tomorrow you'll be inside. Cold, yes, but inside, because the thunder jug waits. The air still smells faintly of the vinegar mop water from yesterday's half-hearted cleaning attempt, though it never quite reaches the corners of the room. It clings instead to the warped timber beams above your bed, mingling with old smoke, sour linen, and the unshakable knowledge that someone dropped the chamber pot last winter and it still haunts the cracks in the floorboards. That someone was you. And though your mother swore she scrubbed it with soap and boiling water, you suspect the ghost of that mistake still rises on damp mornings like this one, curling up from the gaps between the floorboards to mock you with every soggy step. You lie beneath a quilt that smells faintly of boiled onions and sleep sweat, pressing your legs together not for warmth, but out of sheer denial. It's far too cold to get up, too early to be awake, and far, far too risky to go outside. The wind whispers through the walls in a language only your bladder understands. Every creak of the house seems timed to your discomfort. Your body is a traitor, slowly turning its rebellion into urgency. The mattress beneath you, stuffed with straw and something that once resembled feathers, sinks deeper with your indecision. There is, of course, an option. A thunder jug. It waits beneath the bed like an old acquaintance with questionable hygiene and perfect timing. Ceramic, chipped, and colder than the grave. The jug is meant for nights like these, when the frost bites harder than the outhouse, and the walk to the privy might be fatal, or worse, awakening. You know it's there. You can feel its presence without looking. But the thought of reaching down, fumbling with heavy blankets and clumsy garments, hoping not to tip or spill or misalign anything, well, that thought is almost worse than the full bladder itself. Almost. You move slowly, like someone trying not to wake the devil. A foot slips out into the air and recoils immediately. The floor is stone cold, but the urgency presses harder. Somewhere across the room, your sibling mutters in their sleep and flops over with the grace of a dropped sack of turnips. You pause, hand hovering at the edge of the quilt, praying the sound didn't wake them. The jug, after all, is not something you share. It's not even something you admit to using. Not if you value your reputation. Not if you want to avoid that knowing smirk at breakfast. You shift again, inch by inch, until the edge of the jug is in your grasp. It is every bit as cold and heavy as memory warned you, and you pull it up with a carefulness usually reserved for relics and raw eggs. It has a handle, but using it would mean exposing more of yourself to the air than strictly necessary. You balance it on your knees instead, knees now clammy with dread and restraint. The ceramic mouth of the jug gapes like an ancient joke, waiting for your next mistake. This is not the elegant process it should be. There is no candlelight serenity here, no graceful ritual of late-night relief, just panic management and trembling thighs. The layers of wool and linen complicate matters. Every fold is a potential hazard, every shadowed crevice a waiting disaster. You attempt to position yourself, half lifted, half praying, as your joints pop, and your dignity evacuates long before anything else. And then, the sound. It is not flattering, not discreet, not musical. It is, rather, the unmistakable wet plunk of basic biology echoing in a hollow jug that was never designed with acoustics in mind. The walls hear it. The floor hears it. Your ancestors probably hear it, and they're disappointed. A rat in the corner stops chewing just long enough to judge you, then continues as if nothing about your life is surprising anymore. But you do it. You survive. Jug partially filled, you hover like a disappointed bird over its own nest and stare into the depths, wondering if you'll be the one to empty it or if you can foist that job onto your younger sibling without moral consequences. Probably not. You have already tried, once, to trick them by saying it builds character. They are not as gullible as you once hoped. The real danger now is in the return. The jug must go back under the bed, ideally upright, ideally unspilled, and ideally without rolling into the back wall and staying there until summer. You do not trust yourself. Your hands are numb, your legs tingling, and your balance compromised by the ridiculous act of relieving yourself indoors while crouched in half-frozen shame. You slide it back slowly, like burying a secret, then tuck the blankets around yourself as if nothing happened. But something always happens. There's always the drip on the rim you didn't notice, the faint squish where you stepped too near, the knowledge that no matter how many times you rinse it, you'll never look at that jug again without remembering the time it tilted slightly. Just slightly. Enough to remind you that life, even in bed, is not a place of comfort. Not really. Not when you live in a world where the cold fights you and your own body betrays you at 3 in the morning. In the morning light, you'll wash the jug. Or say you will. You'll leave it by the door and wait for someone else to cave first. Perhaps your mother will scold you. Perhaps your sibling will mock you. Perhaps no one will mention it at all, but everyone will know. The smell lingers, a faint note of sourness beneath the usual bouquet of unwashed feet and stale air. You will try to pretend otherwise. You will fail. This is what it means to sleep in an early modern bedroom. Not in silk sheets with a canopy overhead, but in a room shared with siblings, with wool that never fully dries, and a jug of silent judgment crouching at your feet. There are no toilets here, no flush, no privacy, just you, your thunder jug, and the constant risk of an accident you'll never live down. And when you do finally drift back to sleep, it is not peaceful. It is uneasy, twitchy, punctuated by dreams of overflowing jugs and ceramic betrayal. You sleep with your knees together and your soul slightly damaged. Morning comes, as it always does, with light creeping between the wooden shutters and footsteps above your head. Someone has already gotten up, probably stepped in something, probably cursing your name without knowing why. You stretch stiffly, the jug still under your bed, a quiet ceramic reminder that dignity is a luxury and you are not rich. And soon enough, you'll miss even this, because the next step in progress will involve more stairs, heavier buckets, and neighbors who are far too curious about what and whom you're dumping. But that comes later. For now, you lie in silence, eyes still half closed, knowing that soon you'll have to deal with the jug, or worse, pass it to someone else. And that somehow will feel more awkward than anything that came before. Even the splash, even the sound, even the memory of the last winter, when someone missed entirely, and you had to explain the stain to your visiting aunt. But that's another memory. For now, the room is still, the chill hangs low, and the jug beneath the bed sleeps like a coiled guilt. You close your eyes again and try to forget that you'll have to use it again tonight. And that maybe, just maybe, it won't be you who empties it next. Not if you time it just right. Not if you're quiet enough. Not if someone else gets desperate first. And somewhere in the cold morning shadows, you begin to suspect that this jug has seen more of you than your own mirror ever will. The sun has barely started to crest the edge of the trees, but already the warmth is pressing through the air like a damp hand on the back of your neck. You feel it gathering in the folds of your nightshirt, rising from the straw mattress like yesterday's sweat being reheated for another round. The windows don't open. Not really. They just exist as gaps in the wall pretending to be helpful. Outside, a fly begins its morning sermon against the warped wood of the sill, and inside, your bladder begins its own more insistent form of preaching. It is time. Not that you want to, but the call of nature rarely respects comfort, nor does it care that the outhouse sits at the edge of the yard like a joke built entirely out of poor decisions and splintered pine. It's the kind of building that leans slightly as if even it is embarrassed by what it must contain. Still, it waits for you, the door hanging ajar like a mouth about to yawn, and you can already smell it, through the walls, through memory, through dread. Summer has arrived, and it has brought heat, flies, and the uniquely punishing bouquet of waste in repose. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed with a soft groan, the boards beneath your feet warm already from the baked-in heat of the night. The floor is sticky, not with anything sinister, just the vague syrup of humidity, dust, and whatever it is that lives between barefoot soles and wood grain. You dress out of necessity, not decency. The cotton clings before it's even fully on, and you mutter internally at the way the seams always know exactly where to chafe. You consider skipping the walk, just holding it, just waiting. But the pressure won't negotiate. It never does. The house is already buzzing, but not with people, with flies, with heat, with the kind of thick summer air that makes everything feel vaguely boiled. Your little brother has kicked the covers onto the floor, his limbs arranged like someone trying to spell something unintelligible in his sleep. The dog's tail thumps once as you pass, but she wisely doesn't get up. Even the goat in the corner stall makes no move, chewing slowly as if each motion must be justified by some higher cause. You open the door to the yard, and the heat smacks you full in the face like wet laundry hung too low. The morning is bright and already oppressive, with a golden haze that promises nothing but discomfort. The grass sticks to your ankles like clingy children. The air smells of manure, hay, dust, and something rotting slowly and confidently just out of sight, probably behind the shed. You try not to think about it. The outhouse waits across the yard, past the chicken coop and that one patch of dirt that never quite grows anything right. The path is hard-packed, worn by years of reluctant feet, each step echoing the countless others who have made the same slow journey with the same grim purpose. The building itself is small, narrow, and just tall enough to bump your head if you're in a rush. It lists slightly to the left, as if leaning away from its own stench. The door creaks in a way that suggests it hasn't been lubricated since it was built, and it wasn't built with joy. Inside, the heat is worse. It doesn't rise here. It sinks, trapped and fermenting, mingling with the dense perfume of everything that's come before you. The air is heavy with the scent of warm pine, stale sweat, and biological betrayal. Flies spiral in ecstatic circles above the pit, their joy offensive in the face of your misery. The wooden seat is smooth from years of desperate contact, the kind of smooth that comes from thousands of reluctant behinds surrendering to necessity. It's too warm, too intimate, too familiar. You sit slowly, awkwardly, the way one sits on something both unwelcome and inevitable. The wood beneath your thighs is slick and sun-warmed, and it feels like sitting on a lie. There's no ventilation, no privacy, just you, your thoughts, and the soft buzzing of a fly attempting to make love to your ear. You swat half-heartedly, but you know it's hopeless. In this place, they win. Always. You stare at the back of the door where someone years ago scratched a drawing of a face. It's crude and smiling, and has watched every miserable visitor with the same smirk of eternal schadenfreude. You hate it. You hate everything. The smell rises with every breath, a hot bouquet of ammonia and despair. You try breathing through your mouth, but then you taste it. Breathing through the nose gives you the full floral arrangement. There is no winning here, only survival. And then, the paper, or rather, the lack thereof. There's a box in the corner, sawdust, hay, an old Sears catalog with half the pages missing. You pick a page at random. Ladies' summer undergarments, 3 cents. You consider the irony. It's not soft. It's not comforting. It's not really absorbent. But it is something. You fold it with a care usually reserved for letters to the dead, and hope, truly hope, that it won't tear mid-use. You finish the ritual as quickly as possible, a process made slower by the logistics of balancing, folding, and trying not to touch anything that might touch something else. You rise gingerly, legs prickling with the effort, and toss the spent page into the hole where it joins its papery ancestors. The flies rise in protest, then settle again, unbothered. The door groans again as you push it open, the sunlight stabbing at your eyes like a rebuke. The air outside smells fresher, but only by contrast. It takes a full 20 paces before your lungs stop registering offense. Back in the house, you sit down heavily on the bench by the basin, splash water on your face, and pretend it helps. Your hands still smell faintly of hay, sweat, and catalog ink. There is no soap left. Someone used the last of it scrubbing feet last week, and no one's remembered to make more. You rinse again. It doesn't help. Breakfast is still an hour away, but the kitchen already radiates heat. Your mother hums tunelessly over a pot that smells vaguely edible. Your sister gives you a look that suggests she knows exactly where you've been. You ignore it. She'll have her turn soon enough. The jug of milk sweats on the table, already room temperature in the worst way. You pour a cup anyway and sit, grateful to be indoors. Even if the scent of the outhouse has followed you like a guilty conscience tucked beneath your clothes. You've done it. You've braved the pit, survived the flies, endured the seat. But you know it's temporary. The sun is climbing, the air thickening, and the outhouse is only getting worse. By midday, it will be a furnace of filth, a temple to all things unpleasant. By evening, you'll consider going in the dark just to avoid the smell. But the night brings its own horrors. Spiders, rats, things with too many legs and not enough decency. So you sit. You drink your warm milk. You listen to the chickens bicker outside and wonder how long it will be before someone else makes the same walk. You hope it's not you, but it will be. Eventually. And when it is, the outhouse will still be there, leaning, festering, waiting with open hinges and the smug confidence of something that knows you can't avoid it forever. Because in the countryside, in the heat of a long rural summer, nature calls louder, and far more often than you'd like. You close your eyes, take a slow breath, and try not to think about what happens when the pit gets full. That, after all, is someone else's job. Probably. Maybe. Hopefully not yours. But the bucket's been missing lately, and that, you suspect, means your luck is running out. Just like the pages in the catalog, and the patience in your soul. The heat of summer lingers, but it's the kind that clings rather than warms, the kind that stews whatever it touches. The air is thick, close, and sour, the kind of air that doesn't move so much as congeal. Your window is cracked, not open, because anything more generous would let in the chorus of the city night, drunken laughter from the alley, creaking carts, the occasional cat-related blood feud, and the unmistakable rhythm of boots on cobblestones. You hear them before you smell them, which is a small mercy. The thump, drag of worn soles and sloshing barrels. You recognize the sound. You've lived in this street long enough to dread it. It's the night soil man. Again. You lie in bed, one arm curled over your face, trying to muffle the noise and the scent both, though neither responds to your effort. The mattress beneath you sags in the middle, sloping gently toward your sibling's sleeping bulk, and somewhere under the blanket, your foot brushes against something crusty that might once have been bread, or worse, cheese. You don't investigate. Some things are better left unlearned, especially in the dark, especially in your household. The pail at the foot of the bed is heavy tonight, which means someone, likely your uncle, who always claims he forgot, has been using it with enthusiasm and without mercy. You catch a whiff of it, faint but insistent, like a memory that refuses to fade. Your stomach folds in on itself, but you're too tired to gag. You're always too tired these days. Out in the street, A low grunt echoes, a barrel being hoisted. You can picture it without looking. Two men, jackets stained with a palette of human suffering, their sleeves pushed up to the elbow, arms like ropes from too many years of lifting what no one else dares to. One of them hums, off-key and defiant, as though trying to drown out his own awareness. Their cart creaks as it trundles toward the next building, toward someone else's shame. They don't knock. They don't need to. The buckets wait in the dark like loyal dogs. You shift, and the mattress groans beneath you, sounding almost offended. The blanket has slipped down again, and your toes brush the cool, gritty floorboards. Wood that's seen so many spills and leaks and accidents it might as well be a sponge pretending to be a floor. The thought that this same wood sits beneath the pail doesn't help. You imagine what's soaked in, what's growing there now, unseen, malevolent. Somewhere above you, a neighbor coughs with an edge that speaks of coal dust and the long, slow rot of city air. You try not to think of the man on the floor below you, the one who no longer answers knocks. His chamber pot had sat untouched outside his door for days before the landlord noticed the smell wasn't just summer. The night soil men had collected the pot in silence that night, and the undertaker had followed by morning. Life here flows in cycles, and none of them are clean. Your mind drifts, as it often does in the small hours, to the contents of that pail. What it contains of you, your meals, your illness, your indignities. A week's worth of you, waiting in the dark for someone to come and take it away. You wonder if they judge you, these men with the barrels and the ropes of arms. If they glance at what's in the bucket and make assumptions about your diet, your habits, your secrets. If they recognize your shame by smell alone. Perhaps they compare notes. This one's all gruel and cabbage. That one's got money, meat, maybe, and wine. You wouldn't blame them. You judge yourself too. The boots pass beneath your window now, pausing. You hold your breath. The slosh of liquid, the dull scrape of metal, the low grunt of effort, a hiss of something hitting something else. You can smell it clearly now, even with the blanket pulled over your nose. It snakes through the cracks in the wall, through the gaps in the window frame, through your dreams. You try to remember fresh air. You try to remember a breeze that didn't carry human waste on it like a cruel joke. They move on. One building down. Two. Silence. Then another grunt. Another splash. The cycle continues. You imagine them under the gas lamps, backs bent, sleeves rolled, hands red and raw and beyond caring. They are not romantic figures, not unsung heroes. They are tired, underpaid, and necessary. They are the reason you haven't yet had to carry the pail yourself, down 3 flights, across the alley, into the street. You would drop it. You know you would. You've imagined it too many times not to be sure. The sound it would make. The way your neighbor would never let you forget it. The way your shoes would never recover. The night soil men know. They've seen worse. They've smelled worse. They've worn worse. You nod to them when you pass them in daylight, even though most people pretend not to see. It's easier that way. If they're invisible, then your waste is too. But you know, and they know you know. There is a quiet contract between you. The smell lingers long after they're gone. It embeds itself in the walls, in the sheets, in the threads of your clothing. It drifts with you to the factory, to the market, to the pub. It never fully leaves. Like shame, it simply fades until you mistake it for background. You shift again, pulling the blanket tighter, nose nearly touching your own shoulder. You breathe through your mouth, but even that offers no real reprieve. Your mouth is dry anyway. The water jug is empty, and the pump in the yard is only open at dawn. You'll drink then, if the neighbor hasn't beaten you to it. You think of the pail at the foot of the bed, and you think of the hands that will lift it, carry it, dump it. You think of their strength, their weariness, their indifference. You think of the slosh of it, the echo in the barrel. You try not to think about where it all goes after that. Tomorrow the bucket will be empty, but the shame will remain. It always does. In the stained wood, in the sour air, in the way no one meets your eye when they pass your stoop. It clings to you, quiet and damp, like a fog that no wind disperses. You carry it in your clothes, in your breath, in your dreams. A floorboard creaks overhead. The neighbor, perhaps, or a rat the size of a toddler. Either way, it's not your business. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to block out the ceiling. The mattress sags again. A draft kisses your ear through the gap in the wall. Somewhere, something drips. You can't tell if it's inside or out. You don't ask. In the quiet, the kind that only arrives after the filth has been wheeled away, you allow yourself a breath. Not a deep one. Never that. But a breath, all the same. And somewhere far off, beyond the stench, beyond the fog, a train whistle calls into the dark. But that's tomorrow's problem. The rattling doesn't stop, even when you try to still your breath. It hums beneath your feet, vibrating through the soles of your stiff, too thin boots and up into your legs. The train has been moving for hours now. Through scenery you stopped admiring sometime after the third coal town. You're no longer watching the countryside smear past the grimy glass. You're watching the corridor, calculating how long you can hold it, hoping that the answer is until the next station, even though you already know the truth. It isn't. Your body's timing has always been inconvenient. It could have waited until a proper stop, until the place with the tea trolley and a proper floor. But no, it's now. It's time. And so you shift in your seat, carefully, tentatively, because the padding beneath you is about as plush as wet cardboard and half as forgiving. The train sways, groaning through another bend, and you gather your nerve. The corridor to the lavatory is not long, but it feels ceremonial, like a march to a trial. With each step, the floor clatters louder, amplifying your movement. The smell meets you before the door does, not strong, but present, like old soup and wet rust. A faint chemical bite mingles with something more human, something persistent, something your mind tries not to define. You reach the door and hesitate. It's thin, made of warped wood, and streaked with fingerprints that are suspiciously dark. You try not to touch the handle directly. A sleeve will do, or the hem of your coat, already crusted with soot from the station bench. You twist the latch gently, hoping the door won't scream. It does. Everything on this train screams. The hinges groan like they too have digestive complaints. Inside, the space is barely wide enough to turn. You don't so much enter the toilet as fold yourself into it. It's a box. A claustrophobic, rocking, swaying box, and you are now part of its rattling rhythm. You brace yourself on both walls and blink at the bowl. It's not porcelain. It's not even metal. It's a hole. A real, actual hole. Open. Director. An unapologetic tunnel straight to the outside world. The track is visible beneath it, blurred slightly, but undeniable. Ties and rails and stones rushing by in a sickening blur. You stare at it, and it stares back. Wind whistles up through it, a cold, dirty draft that carries the scent of iron and soot, and maybe judgment. There's a small sign, nailed into the wall at an angle that suggests it gave up long ago. Do not use toilet while in station. As if that's the worst possible outcome. As if the alternative, what you're about to do, makes more sense, more grace, more dignity. You shift your weight, the floor tilting ever so slightly as the train climbs some invisible hill. Your knees ache, your back protests. The seat, such as it is frigid and unkind. Your coat bunches beneath you, and the edge of the door digs into your hip as the latch rattles in rhythm with the tracks. Every creak feels public. Every breath feels echoed. And then you begin. There is no moment of peace, no moment of calm, Only the whistling wind below and the awareness that your contribution to the early 20th century is being strewn somewhere between hamlets. Somewhere, a man walking beside the track is about to learn a harsh truth about gravity and timing. You hope, selfishly, that he's already passed. The cold rises from the hole and wraps around you like an unwanted scarf. It creeps up your spine, makes your skin prickle, makes your toes curl inside your boots. The entire process is accompanied by the rhythmic clatter of steel, the occasional lurch of the carriage, and a pervasive sense that you've made several poor life choices, all culminating in this moment, teetering over the void, pants around your ankles, soul exposed. There is, of course, no paper. Or rather, there is something pretending to be paper. Thin, gray, and suspiciously waxy. You don't look at it too closely. You don't want to know what it used to be. You just hope it hasn't been used before. You hope in vain. The wiping is not hygienic. It's an act of hope, performed without conviction. The material crumples and folds and refuses to cooperate. It doesn't absorb so much as smear. You regret everything. You curse the century. You consider becoming a monk, or perhaps an icicle, anything that won't require this again. When it's finally over, you stand too quickly, bang your elbow on the wall, and nearly pitch forward into the hole. Dignity claws its way back as you adjust your layers, each one clinging with sweat and regret. You flush, though the word feels generous. A rusty lever is pulled, a hissing sound occurs, and gravity does the rest. You stare into the hole one last time. The tracks are still moving. The world is still receiving. You leave a little piece of yourself behind and step out, not renewed, not relieved, but slightly less full of fear. The corridor feels longer now. The return journey is slower. Your seat, when you reach it, feels warmer than before. Or maybe you're just grateful to sit on something that isn't trying to suck warmth from your bones. The passengers around you pretend nothing happened. So do you. That is the silent pact. That is train travel in this era. We all carry our burdens, some more downward than others. You tug your coat tighter, as if it can shield you from what just occurred. It can't. The wind whistles at the window, and you imagine it's mocking you. The countryside scrolls on. Miles of fields, miles of rails. Somewhere out there, in the gaps between the towns, your shame has become fertilizer. Perhaps tomorrow a seed will sprout. It would be poetic if it weren't so humiliating. The train rocks gently, a lullaby of iron and inertia. The next stop is far off. The next toilet is even farther. You clench slightly at the thought. And still, somehow you drift, lulled not by comfort, but by the sheer exhaustion of survival. Somewhere ahead, soldiers are squatting in a trench, their helmets tilted, their expressions frozen in a mixture of stoicism and shared horror. And you'll be there soon, holding your dignity in one hand and a roll of rations in the other. But for now, just let the rails hum beneath you. Let the sound fade. Let the memory settle like coal dust. Let the shame dissolve slowly into the cold. The train rocks on, the sound of the rails slowly dulling into a hum behind your temples. You think you've survived the worst of it, the wind up your backside, the flushing void that empties directly onto the world. But the silence that follows is not peace, it is waiting. And the next place waiting takes you is even less forgiving. There is no more rumbling metal or enclosed shame. There is only mud now. Mud, and the quiet misery of waiting your turn with a shovel. You feel the cold before you feel anything else. It clings to your coat like wet wool and wraps around your ankles like a judgmental cat. Everything here is soaked. Your boots, your breath, the hem of your uniform that was stiff when dry, and now just smells like old bread and moldy canvas. You've long stopped trying to keep your socks dry. That was a young man's game. That was week one optimism. Now you just focus on not losing your foot when you lift it. The queue snakes along the edge of the trench. You don't even ask what it's for anymore. If it's a queue, you get in. Maybe it's for food. Maybe it's for a letter home. Maybe it's for 30 seconds over a pit with a wooden plank and a splintered view of the French countryside. One by one, the figures ahead of you shuffle forward like damp laundry slowly blowing in a sour wind. No one talks. Talking is too much effort, and besides, no one wants to admit out loud what this particular line is for. The trench smells like metal and rot and time. But the latrine pit has ambitions. It aspires to something worse. You can smell it long before you see it. It rises like steam, even in the cold, a warmth that promises nothing good. The pit is just a rectangular hole dug behind a screen of Hessian sacks, barely enough for privacy unless you define privacy as no direct eye contact. You can still hear every cough, grunt, and deeply personal regret. You shift from one foot to the other, and the mud answers back with a squelch that is neither solid nor liquid. It's as if the earth has lost all loyalty to the concept of ground. You think about moving, but movement causes cold water to seep further into your boots, and you're not sure you can afford to feel anything colder. When your turn finally comes, it's with the reluctant reverence of someone being called to an execution they requested themselves. You duck behind the curtain, if you can call a damp sack and some barbed wire a curtain, and lower yourself carefully onto the plank, which sags under your weight and creaks in protest. It's slick. Everything is slick. You grip the side of the sandbag wall like a man clinging to the edge of reason. Beneath the plank is the pit. The pit doesn't want to be looked at. It contains layers of history, some recent, some mythic. You stare straight ahead, breathing shallowly through your mouth, which doesn't help much. The smell clings to the air like it has opinions, like it wants to tell you about the lives it's digested. You perform your business quickly, not because of shame, but because the cold is reaching parts of you it has no right to reach, and because the man behind you is already making impatient footstep noises. Not quite a cough, not quite a sigh, just the kind of scuff that says, "I, too, have eaten the beans." There's no paper. Of course not. There's a soggy magazine page nailed to the post, but it's mostly ink now. You consider using your sleeve, but remember the long walk back to the trench, the way your arm will swing with each step, and how the cold wind will weaponize every movement. So you settle for the newspaper. The headline disappears as you fold it. The hardest part is standing again. Not physically, but spiritually. You rise a slightly lesser person, a man who has stared into the pit and felt the pit stare back. You fumble with your buttons, wipe your hand on something that used to be a sandbag, and stumble out into the line again, where the next soul nods at you like you've just passed a torch no one wanted. There is no sink, no soap, only the back of your hand, a muddy rag, and the hope that whatever touched you doesn't linger in the bloodstream. Back in the main trench, you join the others in pretending the event never happened. You discuss biscuits, or the weather, or a girl from home who probably doesn't remember you. Everyone here is carrying something, and no one wants to talk about what they left behind in the pit. Later, when you move to a more modern camp, one with metal drums and raised latrines, it barely feels like progress. The new toilets are essentially barrels with hats. They don't stink quite as much, which makes them feel suspicious. You don't trust anything clean anymore. It's probably hiding something. You learn to brace yourself with one hand on the cold tin wall and your other hand holding your belt like a leash. You crouch above a drum, swaying gently with the wind, and hear other soldiers in nearby stalls humming quietly to themselves or muttering prayers that sound suspiciously like football chants. It's strange, the rituals we develop for comfort. You learn to avoid going after stew night. You learn not to look down if the sun's too bright. You learn that someone is always watching the latrines, not because they're perverse, but because boredom makes voyeurs of us all. The barrels are burned out every few days, the contents doused in petrol and set alight. Sometimes you see the smoke curling over the hill, dark and oily, and you remember what's in it. You remember that part of you is now in the sky. That's a metaphor you didn't need. Occasionally, the latrines overflow. Rain, use, neglect. It doesn't take much. Then it becomes everyone's problem. And by everyone, of course, they mean you. The lowest rank always gets the shovel, always gets the bucket, always gets the worst seat in history. You scrub with sand and curses. You think about your old life, your clean life, the ceramic toilet, the bath mat, the lock on the door. Those were luxuries you never appreciated. You wonder, not for the first time, if the enemy is experiencing this too. You imagine the other side, crouched behind their own rows of barrels, swearing in another language but making the same faces. You like to think so. Misery loves company, and nothing is more equalizing than defecation in public. At night, the cold is worse. The wind turns the latrine screens into instruments of punishment. You hear every gust like it's trying to find the warmest part of you and ruin it. You consider not going at all, just waiting. But the longer you wait, the more it hurts. Eventually, you rise from your bedroll, already damp with condensation, and stumble back into the darkness, holding your coat closed like a secret. You pass others along the way, some with toilet roll tucked under their arms like sacred relics, some with their heads down, eyes glazed, marching forward like men heading to confession. You all know. No one says it. The latrine at night is somehow worse, not because of smell or even the cold, but because of the silence. There are no birds, no breeze, no sounds of shells in the distance, just your own breathing, your own shuffling, the distant splash. You feel small and oddly reverent. You don't speak of this in letters. You don't write home about the plank, the barrel, the day the wind blew the curtain away mid-squat. You write about the camaraderie, the sunrises, the music someone plays on a dented harmonica. You leave this part out. Everyone does. And yet, this is what binds you all. Not the battles, not the medals, not the headlines, but this, the shared degradation of being human in a place that doesn't care. The line, the mud, the stink, the shame. The way a man can lose his innocence not in combat, but in the quiet, shuffling queue behind a latrine barrel. You crawl back into your bunk, shivering slightly, wrapping yourself in something that smells like smoke and old sweat and comfort. Tomorrow, the queue will form again. Someone will hum. Someone will curse. And someone will lean on a shovel and wait for the fire to take it all away again. But for now, let the wind hush. Let the stink fade. Let the shame settle into your boots and stay there. And think, if you must, of childhood bathrooms and cold porcelain and a locked door you never appreciated. Because somewhere up ahead, in a world far removed from trenches and drums, a child will clutch a wooden pass and whisper a prayer before entering a school bathroom that remembers everything. But not yet. Not just yet. Let the cold settle. Let the silence stretch. Let the latrine burn low in the dark. The queue dissolves behind you, its silence left to smolder in the night wind, and you return to something colder in a different way. The latrine pit is gone now, but its memory lingers in your bones, like smoke in a wool coat, or a dream that had dirt under its nails. And just as your mind begins to drift somewhere gentler, something from childhood returns, a splintered door, a cracked seat, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched when you're most vulnerable. Because after the war came the schools, and in the schools came the bathrooms, and in the bathrooms came everything else. You're back in a corridor that smells like boiled cabbage and wet polyester, lined with beige tiles and the faint echo of generations who were never allowed to cry. The bell has rung. Children have scattered. You linger by the door, holding the large metal key, a key not meant for small hands, heavy enough to suggest consequence. It dangles from a piece of twine or a wooden block larger than your head, and it marks you, loudly, as someone with biological needs. You're carrying your shame through the hallway, like a marching banner. You hope no one sees you, but of course they do. You pass a teacher who nods absently, and it makes you feel worse. The nod says, "I understand," but the tone says, "I will forget this happened by lunch." And then there are the others, the ones your age, or just meaner than their age allows, who take notice. There is always someone. A quiet laugh, a whispered name, a knowing glance that travels down the hall faster than rumor and stings longer than soap in a paper cut. When you reach the bathroom door, the first challenge isn't courage, it's physics. The door itself requires your full body weight to open. It sticks in the frame like it's trying to protect you from what's inside. Or perhaps it's just swollen from too many winters without heat. You push harder, the rusted hinge groaning like the slow creak of a bad decision. Inside, the air hits your face like a punishment. The smell is timeless. Mildew, ammonia, and something deeply human. Something like fear or despair or feet. It clings to the walls and rises from the floor. The floor is wet, but not recently cleaned. It's the kind of wet that has no clear origin, spattered, pooled, uncertain. You learn not to look down too long. It only leads to questions. The stalls line one wall, short, narrow, and indifferent to the concept of privacy. The doors swing just high enough to expose socks and just low enough to reveal the top of a crouch. If the goal was maximum humiliation with minimum obstruction, someone has succeeded. Most of the latches are broken, and those that work do so with a noise loud enough to summon ghosts. You pick the least worst stall. This is a process. You glance under for footprints. You check the seat for moisture, graffiti, and anything sticky. There will always be something sticky. The toilet paper is there technically, but it's the school-issued kind. Coarse, gray, and so non-absorbent it might as well be tracing paper. You tear off a few sheets anyway, just in case, folding them like origami to create some illusion of softness. As you settle in, you hear footsteps. Not many, just one or two. The worst number. Enough to form a judgmental audience, but not enough to blend into background noise. The stall beside you creaks open. There's the shuffle of feet, a cough, and then nothing. They're waiting, listening. This is a standoff. You clench. You wait. The silence grows unbearable, and so you cough, just to break it. But now they know your voice. It's a tactical error. You vow to move schools, or countries, or planets. You sit there, breathing in the faint ghost of disinfectant from a cleaning long ago and far away. There's a spider web in the corner. The spider is gone, but the web remains, sagging with dust like a failed parachute. Above your head, there's graffiti carved into the paint. Names, insults, desperate pleas. One simply reads, "Help," scratched deep into the surface with something sharper than a pencil. You wonder if it was meant for the teacher, the janitor, or perhaps the next visitor who had to live through this same moment of indecision and dread. Eventually, necessity wins. You go. Not because you feel safe, or hidden, or ready, but because you're running out of alternatives. You brace your feet on the floor, cold seeping through the soles of your shoes, and perform your human ritual with the precision of someone being observed by satellites. The flush lever is chipped, rusted at the base, and takes several determined pushes. It grinds, groans, then finally chokes down its burden with a watery shudder. The water spins with a reluctance that suggests trauma. You do not wait to see if it all disappears. You've done your part. There's no sink in the stall, of course. That would be too easy. You step out into the echoing room, making sure to avoid the questionable puddles on the floor. The sink is a porcelain relic, stained, chipped, and streaked with soap that looks like it died last week. The faucet is one of those spring-loaded types that demands a full-body wrestling match for each second of water. You press, and the water comes out in a miserable dribble, scalding 1 second, freezing the next. There is no towel. There is a dryer on the wall. It hums when you hit the button, then roars like a wounded bear, producing wind that is neither warm nor consistent. You wipe your hands on your trousers, which are already damp from some earlier mystery encounter. The key, heavy in your pocket, clangs as you walk. You didn't mean to let it swing so visibly, but it does, drawing the eyes of others in the hallway as you return it to the teacher's desk with the quiet shame of a returning soldier. You don't meet her eyes. She doesn't ask how it went. Everyone understands. Back at your desk, you sit carefully, aware of every crinkle and damp spot. You try to focus on the chalkboard, but your mind is still in the stall. Not with what you did, but with what might have been overheard. Every cough, every shuffle, every possible smirk now feels like evidence. Your classmates carry on, whispering, doodling, staring at the clock. But you are elsewhere. You are already remembering this moment as trauma. It's not a single incident. It's a pattern, a rhythm, a lifelong conditioning. Bathrooms as battlegrounds, privacy as a privilege. You learn to hold it, to plan your days around when and where relief is safe. You develop the bladder of a long-haul trucker and the anxiety of someone who's always one locked door away from disaster. At home, things aren't always better. The family bathroom is shared, small, never heated. Your sibling bangs on the door. Your parent knocks twice, then yells. The seat is always up or down, but never correct. The floor is cold linoleum, and the toilet paper, when it exists, is always understocked. But it is, at least, yours, or shared among people whose judgment stings in familiar ways. The school bathroom, however, becomes a lifelong scar. Even decades later, you'll walk into a public restroom and feel your shoulders tense. You'll test the stall door before you lock it, then test it again. You'll flinch when the dryer turns on. You'll sigh with relief when the paper is soft. You'll wonder why you still care so much, but you will. You always will. Because somewhere deep in the folds of memory, there's a hallway, and a key, and a door that groans like regret, and someone whispering your name, not kindly. You shift in your seat. You breathe through it. You let it go. Mostly. The classroom fades, and with it, the echo of that bathroom door. Another place waits now, just past the door marked Employees Only, through a parking lot that smells like gasoline and old coffee, past a pump with a flickering light, and into the cracked tile fluorescent nightmare of a gas station lavatory. But not just yet. Not while your hands still remember the feel of that cold metal latch. Let the fluorescent buzz hum low. Let the memory of the key grow dim. Let the stall door stay closed, if only for tonight. The school hallway fades behind you, its institutional tile echoing too many footsteps and not enough compassion. But the discomfort doesn't leave. It evolves. It trades adolescence for adulthood, but not for freedom. It simply changes shape, grows quieter, heavier, lonelier. And now it carries you forward, out of the classroom and into the long stretch of road between towns. Out on the highway, with nothing but engine hum and radio static for company, comes the next chapter of bodily necessity, the gas station bathroom. It begins with hesitation. Not the kind that passes quickly, but the kind that lingers in the throat and makes your stomach argue with itself. You know what you must do. You've ignored the urge for 2 exits already. The hum of tires on asphalt hasn't distracted you. The cassette tape warbling its way through a second loop hasn't soothed you. There's only so long you can clench and pretend you don't need to visit a place built entirely out of other people's regrets. You spot the sign, restrooms available in peeling vinyl lettering, half lit by a flickering bulb. The word clean is scribbled hastily beneath it in permanent marker. You do not believe this word, but you park anyway. The gravel crunches under your tires in a way that sounds like a warning. The building is rectangular and unenthusiastic, painted the color of nicotine-stained apologies. Inside, a single bell chimes above the door as you enter, its tone somehow both sharp and tired. The cashier glances up without lifting his head. He doesn't need to ask what you need. Your body language has already betrayed you. You're here for a reason, and it's not gasoline. You ask for the key. He slides it toward you without a word. It's attached to something ridiculous. A warped plank of wood, a plastic hubcap, an entire spatula. Something oversized and humiliating, as if the object itself is trying to shame you into giving up. You take it anyway. This is the transaction. Dignity is optional. The bathroom is outside, around the back. Of course it is. You step back into the dusk and walk along the side of the building, past the humming soda machine and the overflowing ashtray. A moth flutters against the yellow porch light. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks, once, as if in protest. You round the corner and see the door. It's metal, rusted near the bottom where the rain and time have done their work. The paint is flaking, the handle is greasy, and the whole thing leans slightly, as if trying to escape its own purpose. You insert the key. It resists at first. Of course it does. You wiggle it with the practiced finesse of someone who's done this before. The mechanism clicks. You inhale deeply, not out of courage, but necessity, and push the door open. The smell is immediate and ancestral. It rises to meet you like a memory you didn't know you had. Urine, bleach, despair, and something floral that is trying very hard but failing. A blue urinal cake floats in the corner of your awareness like a shipwreck in a shallow sea. The fluorescent light overhead buzzes with a sound that isn't quite light and isn't quite comfort. It flickers, casting your shadow in a nervous strobe across the cracked tiles. The sink is stained the color of weak coffee and old decisions. Its faucet is one of those push-to-flow types that spits water for exactly 1 second per press. It's missing a knob. The mirror above it is more metal than reflection, polished in patches and warped in ways that suggest an early life trauma. You glance into it and see yourself, somehow both older and smaller than you remember. There's only one stall. Of course. The door swings inward too far and catches on your shoe, and you have to shuffle sideways just to get in. Once inside, you realize the lock is a sliding bolt that doesn't align. You try anyway. It clinks into place with the confidence of a false promise. You don't believe it, but you pretend. The seat is there. That's the most generous word. It is present. It is connected to the bowl. It is only partially cracked. There is a cigarette burn on one side, and a faint ring where someone tried to clean it but lost heart halfway through. You tear off a handful of toilet paper. Not to use, not yet, but to lay down. A futile attempt to create a barrier between yourself and everyone who has come before. The toilet paper itself is the same as always. Thin, brittle, the texture of despair in physical form. It is mounted on a holder that spins far too freely, giving the illusion of generosity while offering almost nothing. You learn quickly not to pull too fast. It tears. Always. You sit, or hover, or negotiate something between the two. And in that moment, you feel something ancient settle into your spine. A kind of humility that modern life doesn't usually offer. A reminder that all progress eventually comes to this. You, alone, half squatting in a tiny, flickering metal room, trying to avoid touching anything. Your thoughts wander, as they often do in places like this. You begin to wonder about the nature of cleanliness, of public spaces, of why every gas station bathroom seems like it's been designed by someone who's never used a bathroom themselves. You consider the life of the person who last cleaned this place, if it was cleaned, and how much they were paid. Probably not enough. Definitely not enough. There is graffiti on the door. Of course there is. Some of it is crude. Some of it is oddly poetic. One reads, "This is the end and the beginning." Another simply says, "Help," as if echoed across decades from the last chapter. You stare at it for longer than you mean to. Eventually, you do what must be done. Not because it's comfortable, not because it's the right time or place, but because the human body is a traitor, and necessity always wins. You breathe shallowly, pretending it helps. The air is metallic and indifferent. You flush with a foot, because of course. The lever sticks, then releases with a thunk. The water swirls sluggishly. You do not wait to see what remains. Some things are better left unseen. At the sink, the water is cold and brown for the first second. You press the faucet repeatedly, one finger acting as a piston, while the other hand tries to catch the brief spurt. The soap dispenser is a crusted relic, oozing something with the texture of expired glue. You lather as best you can and dry your hands on your jeans. The hand dryer exists, technically, but it emits only a faint wheeze, like a sigh from the past. You open the door with a paper towel, which disintegrates immediately, and use your elbow instead. You toss the remains in the general direction of the overflowing bin. It bounces once and misses. You do not go back for it. No one ever does. You return the key to the counter without making eye contact. The cashier doesn't ask how it went. He knows. You nod slightly, the way travelers acknowledge each other in shared suffering. You leave without buying anything. You feel bad about this, but not bad enough to go back in. Back in the car, the seat is warm from the sun. You sit gingerly, your body slightly changed. Not harmed exactly, but altered. A little more wary. A little less idealistic. You stare out the windshield at the highway, wondering how long until the next stop, and whether it will be better. It won't. But you'll hope anyway. You drive on. The sky fades toward evening. The road stretches, endless and humming. And somewhere in the distance, far beyond the headlights, you sense the final chapter approaching. One where the bathroom is smart, sleek, automatic. A place where everything works, and yet somehow, nothing really feels safe. But that's later. For now, let the taillights ahead blur into red streaks. Let the hum of tires soothe what the bathroom couldn't. Let the door behind you stay closed. For a while. A soft hush settles over the car ride as you leave behind the rattling gas station asphalt. The bathroom's door a silent punctuation to the previous chapter. You shift in your seat, feeling the modern warmth of heated leather beneath you. And something in your spine loosens, as if the world itself has softened its edges. Yet you carry an undercurrent of old anxiety, the kind that lingers when you've been reminded of humanity's long relationship with private suffering. You park again, this time somewhere your breath can expand, unbothered by flickering lights or uneven metal doors. Modernity awaits, but ancient doubts cling like mist. You step out into a softly lit corridor whose carpet is deep and springy, each footfall muffled like a whispered secret. The walls carry no stains, no scrawl of desperation, just the quiet hum of climate control adjusting itself, promising comfort you barely trust. Somewhere up ahead, a faint whoosh signals an automatic door. Unbidden, it parts like a veil, revealing the sanctuary inside. You pause at its threshold, closed off from humidity and dirt, but not from the whispers that still creep along your spine. Inside, this bathroom is nothing like the ones that have haunted your dreams. No lever handle clutch, no urinal cakes dissolving into rot. Instead, A welcoming glow bathes pale tiles, and fixtures gleam with hygienic confidence. You pull the heavy stall door, and, oh, but the lock slides smooth, affirming itself without clatter or hesitation. Your breath eases, but your heart won't stop echoing the rhythms of lock clicks past when you weren't so sure. You settle onto the seat, and for a moment, a wave of wonder washes over you at how silent it is. No hum of flickering fluorescence, no stench or sticky residue giving away the world beyond. You lay your hand on cold porcelain and marvel at how unmarked it is, how unfettered by shame. You could sit here forever, but your body has other ideas. You close your eyes and begin to breathe into the sensation, what it feels like to trust the mechanism beneath you. The seat warms, not with discomfort, but with mechanical efficiency, a soft, damp heat coaxed by electricity and timers. You settle further, and somewhere deep inside, you sense it, a rebellion of memory, triggered by ease, by softness, by the absence of dread. Your body relaxes, but your mind drifts toward the edges of familiarity, where stone met wood, met scratchy straw, where humidity and neglect and scavenging rats wove into privacy and inevitable friction. Here, it should be done. Here, it will be fine. But the ghosts of misaligned locks, splashing water, torn tissue, and judgment still swirl just beyond the safe glow. You begin to think of rituals, the flush that follows, a soft displacement of water and sound. You picture it, gentle yet undeniable, a mechanical sigh of relief that would have been unthinkable centuries ago. No sound of wood creaking or trap swooshing open to the night. Here it is contained. You imagine water spiraling, taking with it what you no longer need, leaving behind only emptiness that feels almost alarming in its cleanliness. You find yourself reflecting on the choices modern bathrooms offer: heated seats, adjustable sprays, odor-neutralizing filters. Each setting is a small rebellion against history's cruelty, a gesture of comfort where there was none. Still, a dim spark of old fear keeps you cautious. What if it fails? What if the sensor misreads, the water swirls too slow, the door jams? Panic, born from past lives squatting or balancing on boardwalk planks, whispers across your nerves until you realize you're tilting and you must still yourself to sit. You close your eyes. The sterility is nearly devotional, invoking quiet awe. You sense the weight of generations who've sat and feared and hoped for nothing more than a lock and a single breath of dignity. In this glow, you feel the sum of those whispered prayers, even as the fluorescent yields to this gentler LED glow. You let your breath stretch into the silence. Then comes the flush. It is soft, mechanical, dignified. There is no splash, no surprise, no clang of wood against metal, no sudden echo bouncing back from cavernous brick. Just water, completing its circuit. You feel the shift in pressure beneath your skin, the release in your lower abdomen. The world exhales alongside you. You linger in the seat, because here you can, because it is allowed, because even public spaces can offer sanctuary when built with intention. And for the first time in a long time, you allow yourself to lean back and fully accept what this moment offers. A rhythm, a ritual, a miracle of design that spans centuries. When you stand, you notice the lack of awkwardness, no scraping of paper against fabric, no uncertain fumbling in half-light. Your fingertips hover over brushed metal sensors that coax water into your hands, warm and clear. You rub, no desperation, no rinse water that sparkles with the residue of failures past. Here, it cleans, and you sense how thoroughly modernity has adopted hygiene as ritual, not shame. Your hands hover over an automatic dryer that puffs air in a gentle loop, and you find yourself surrendering to it, letting your fingers lift in response to the unseen current. The warmth feels like a kindness, an act of care for something you didn't expect to miss. You realize how often you've rushed from the stall to the door, How rarely you linger to feel yourself restored. At the automatic door, you wait, framed between metal sensors and glass that parts like a gate. You step through, carrying with you a thread of awareness, a small freckle of gratitude for how far we've come and how far we still might fall. The corridor beyond smells of citrus cleaner and faint sunshine. Everything is diffuse, reliable, safe. You press your hand to the wall, feeling its smooth coolness, and you let your shoulder relax. You are upright in a place redeemed. And yet, the old suspicion remains. What if tomorrow the sensor fails, the power flickers, the lock sticks, and you are once again negotiating with the physical world in dim corridors because someone forgot to empty the bin? But you won't think of that now. You'll drive home, perhaps. You'll return to your comforters, sink into pillows, and feel the weight of the world recede, except where it lingers, softly, under your spine. You'll tuck in the memory of convenience as if it were a gift, though you know its fragility. In the bathroom's retreat, you understood something, that every generation's relief is haunted by the previous generation's fear. And yet, they soften with time. You walk into the bedroom, the floor plush beneath your feet, the air cool and safe. You crawl in, slipping beneath covers that expire warmth in measured breaths. You pull them up to your chin and listen to the hum of modern life, to the silence left behind by the bathroom's mechanical calm, to the quiet pulse of memory that hums beneath your ribcage. Sleep will come soon, but before it does, let yourself linger in the last echo of ancient dread, transformed into present comfort. Let the night hold you like porcelain in the palms of human hands, shaped by centuries, polished by progress, but still, in the corner of your mind, reminding you how close it all once was, and might yet be again.